Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. Potter left Hogwarts. Potter left Hogwarts. Potter left Hogwarts without being stopped, without being guarded, and definitely without any problems. If Mad Eye had not been in Diagon Alley today, if Mad Eye hadn't had his magical eye, he would have never seen Potter going through the alley as if it was normal for a student to visit Diagon Alley on a weekend in the beginning of November. What was Potter doing in Diagon Alley? Mad Eye did the only reasonable thing to do in his mind. He followed the boy, a boy who might not be a boy. Am I truly right? Is he an imposer? Mad Eye thought again. It would explain how Potter had been able to leave school grounds and find his way to Diagon Alley. If he was an imposer, he surely was able to apparate. Mad Eye just had to confirm and prove it. There was just one problem with his plan. Potter headed into Gringotts. Mad Eye followed, just to see Potter open a side door and enter the hallway behind it. For a moment Mad Eye started to follow, then his brain caught up with him and he stopped. No one entered the hallways behind any doors of Gringotts but the goblins or wizards with goblin guards. There was no way Mad Eye would be able to do so, at least not without being bodily harmed and maybe killed. But Potter... Mad Eye stared at the door. Potter had closed behind himself as if it was a dragon. He just stood there and stared and waited for Potter to be thrown out, hurt, tortured, and maybe dead. A minute went by, another 5, 10 more. Nothing happened. Why? Mad Eye knew. Mad Eye had seen what happened if a wizard disregarded the treaty with the goblins. He knew what happened if you entered their realm without a proper escort. He had seen it, and it hadn't been pretty at all. And the goblins would never be unaware of a trespasser like that. They lived and breathed the same motto as Moody, constant vigilance. "May I help you, sir?" Mad Eye blinked and looked down to his knees where a goblin in full armor was standing, eyeing him warily. Mad Eye had been so fixated at the door that he had even forgotten his own life motto of constant vigilance. A boy entered in that door, without a guard. A couple of minutes ago, Mad Eye finally said, much too stunned to think over his words before answering. It was as if his whole world had ceased to exist like he knew it, and it was further crashed when the goblin in front of him answered with a snarl. "The boy, as you call him, wizard, is a highly respected clan leader. If you ever disrespect him like that again, I will cut out your tongue before I bear you entrance to Gringotts. It is his every right to enter over there if he so wishes. And now leave. We don't need wizards prying in our business." Mad Eye gawked at the goblin. Then he did the only thing he could do. He left Gringotts and decided to wait outside and trail the boy again. "At least now I am sure that this truly is an imposer." Mad Eye snarled to himself. There is no way that the Potter boy is able to get enough respect from the goblins to be recognized as a well-respected clan leader. Magnus Adam Selwyn was an experienced barrister. He was working for Fawley and Flint Selwyn and had seen a lot in his 51 years of life, except that he had never ever seen, he hadn't even dreamt about, something as unusual as he had been facing for months now, in his whole life. Adam Selwyn, he hated the name Magnus with passion, was the first barrister ever of a goblin clan leader. Well, a human-looking clan leader of the goblin nation, but that made it even more special than it was already, simply because there shouldn't be a human-looking goblin clan leader. The goblins never got along with wizards. Adam had no idea how those special circumstances came into being that ended with a human-looking goblin clan leader. And Adam wasn't truly sure if he wanted to know. It was enough for him to know that he was working for the only human-looking goblin clan leader in the world. And he had the biggest coup going that he was able to imagine, not that he had imagined that when he was called to Gringotts the first time, about 3 months ago. At that time, the circumstances around his new, potential client had been a first for him as well. He had been contacted by a goblin, just to be led to one of the hidden bureaus of Gringotts, that normally were only accessed by a few carefully picked wizards, mostly lords or high-ranking officials. Adam was neither, so he had never expected to ever see those halls. "Adam, did not know what to expect from this meeting. Well, the goblin that had contacted him had clearly stated he was doing so for his client and not for himself, but Adam had never heard about a wizard using a goblin to contact a lawyer before. In that moment his guide stopped in front of a richly carved double door and opened it. "The lawyer, Nardog," he said. "Let him in," was the answer, and a second later Adam was all but shoved in the room behind the doors. The doors closed behind his back like the entrance to a tomb. Adam frowned. "What now?" "Sit, Mr. Selwyn," the goblin said and shoved a money bag in Adam's direction. "For today," Adam nodded. He knew that when he was paid for today, that even if he did not accept the final offer, he would be unable to speak about it. As for today, the goblin in front of him was his client. "So tell me, Master Goblin, how may I be of service?" he asked, taking the money. "We'll see," the goblin answered, eyeing him critically. "First I need to know some things, and then I will decline or accept you." Adam nodded. "That's nothing new," he answered. "I thought as much," the goblin said. "So tell me, Mr. Selwyn, are you a follower of Albus Dumbledore?" Adam blinked in surprise. Normally he was asked if he was a Death Eater, or other things, but that? He hesitated for a moment. He did not like Dumbledore very much. He had been a Slytherin in Hogwarts, and the old man had never seemed to be really fair, and of course the other Slytherins hated him with passion. "I know," he finally said, sitting straight. "I do not follow his agenda. I have too many friends on the other side." He knew that this would be the end of this job. There was no way he would be granted another chance, and the reason was simple. Everybody knew the goblins would more likely follow Dumbledore than Voldemort when they had to choose sides. "So you are a follower of the Dark Lord?" the goblin asked. Adam shook his head. "No," he answered sincerely. "I have too much family on the light side, and I don't like his ideals." One moment the room was silence. Then the goblin grinned a devilish grin. "Good," he said. "I will bring you my clan leader. He will discuss with you what he wants you to do." Adam blinked. "Good? Clan leader?" Adam knew that clan leader was the term for the goblin head of house and also lord of house. They were exclusive individuals, never seen in the halls of Gringotts. Adam also knew that clan leaders were all very old. You could not become a clan leader if you were not at least 100 years of age. "Your clan leader, Master Goblin?" he finally asked. "Yes, human," the goblin answered. "He was the one asking for one of you. Be not disrespectful to him, human. It will cost you greatly if you are." Adam just nodded. Then he followed the goblin even deeper into the halls of Gringotts. The decoration got even more pronounced. Speaking of wealth and power, the tapestries showing the battles and wars of the goblin nation. It was intimidating. Finally they stopped. Adam blinked. They stood in front of a tapestry, not in front of one of the richly ornamented doors that he could see in the distance. The goblin simply pulled the tapestry of a very bloody battle aside. Adam guessed from what he remembered that it was a tapestry showing the great battle of the North Fields, and exposed a hidden door behind it. He opened the door. "Step in and wait here," the goblin said. "The clan leader will soon be there. Just remember, he is one of our most honored leaders. Step out of line, and it will be the last thing you ever do." And with that the goblin left the room, leaving behind an astonished and slightly frightened barrister. Adam gulped, then he tried to calm his nerves by taking the time to look at the room itself. The furniture and the walls spoke of money. The furniture was old and handcrafted, the walls carved marble, and behind the still unoccupied desk hung a crest. The crest showed a serpent winding itself around a lily. The crest itself was green, the serpent silver, and the lily white. It was a simple crest, but Adam had never seen it before. "Do you like my crest?" a warm, low voice suddenly asked. The voice was young, yet marred with a slightly foreign lilt to it, as if the speaker had half forgotten how to speak English. It wasn't the accent of a foreigner, but of a very old being who had lived through different stages of the English language. Adam turned on his heel and stared at the person who had just entered the room. The person closed the door. The first thing Adam registered was that the person in front of him was human. The second that the human had come alone, the goblin had not come back, even if normally no goblin would let a human wander alone in their halls. "Where is your guide?" Adam asked, just to clap his mouth shut in the next moment. This man could be his client. That was not an introduction he would like to make to a new client. Where, by Merlin and Morgana, had gone his Slytherin side, now that he needed it desperately. The man chuckled. I am a clan leader, he answered warmly. As I am part of the Goblin Nation, I don't need a guide. But you are human. Adam wished he would stop channeling a Gryffindor and voice his thoughts with a filter. Not really, the man answered, scrutinizing him, but I would be called a wizard today. Adam just stared at him. The man, a young man, more a boy than a man, had shoulder-length black hair, some part of it braided back with Slytherin green ribbons like the lords of old had worn. The robes he wore were also cut in an older style. They were green with a black tunic and black trousers beneath. Black leather boots and a silver belt, looking as if it was made of silver leaves, added the final touch to his appearance. Then Adam remembered the fact that clan leaders had to be at least 100 of age. The boy in front of him didn't look like it, but looks could be deceiving, and the boy's accent spoke of times long past. Finally, Adam decided to drop into a belated bow, introducing himself. I am Magnus Adam Selwyn, barrister of Forley and Flint, Selwyn. Forgive me if I offended you in any form, my lord. He wasn't sure if the apology would be accepted, but it was the least he could do after his Gryffindor reaction just seconds ago. The answer was a soft chuckle. You are forgiven, child, he said. Unlike what most of my fellow clan leaders think, I'm not interested in killing everyone who offends me. Adam released a slow, relieved breath. Stand up, child, and then sit down, the clan leader said, and Adam did as he was told. The clan leader made his way to his desk and leaned against it. That action brought him in close proximity to Adam, who sat in front of the desk on a visitor's chair. If I may ask, who are you? Adam finally asked, when the silence started to feel awkward. The young-looking man smiled and bowed slightly. Morgana, at your service, he said. Morgana? Adam was not sure if the name was a first or a last name. The other smiled again. My goblin name, he answered, smiling. Adam blinked at that. He knew for a fact that there shouldn't be any human-looking clan leaders, and definitely none that had a goblin name. My lord, may I ask how it is possible for me to exist if there isn't any records of me in the ministry? The other man asked with a raised eyebrow. Adam inclined his head hesitatingly. The answer was a soft smile. Circumstances, he said. Let's just say that I predate the ministry. Adam's eyes widened at that. He knew for a fact that the Ministry of Magic replaced the Wizards' Council in 1707, which meant that the human-looking man in front of him had to be at least 300 years old. He gulped. May I ask with what I can assist you, my lord? He finally managed to say. The clan leader in front of him looked at him amused, at least until Adam managed to ask his question. With several things, my dear Mr. Selwyn, the young-looking lord answered. I do plan to return to the place that is rightfully mine in the magical world, but there are some obstacles I have to take care of before I make my first move. The deathly green eyes of the clan leader in front of him pierced him with a cold and determined stare. Adam felt a cold shiver running down his spine. This boy-looking being was no one you should cross. Can you explain further? He finally asked the young-looking lord. Of course, Morgana inclined his head. Then he sat down behind the desk and took out a folder full of paper. You could say that, thanks to who I am, I have certain rights to an important individual of the magical community. I don't think I understand, Adam replied. The man in front of him smiled, then he pulled off the family ring he wore and turned it so that Adam could see the crest. Adam's breathing hitched. He knew that crest. It was the Potter family crest. Adam's eyes snapped up to look at the man in front of him. How? Like I said, circumstances, the clan leader replied. Let's just say that I have always had the right to wear it. But Harry Potter is one of the reasons why you are here, the man replied. Since you are a barrister, I don't think that I have to tell you what should have been done years ago when James and Lily Potter died. Adam understood instantly. Since the clan leader in front of him had the lordship ring of the Potters, the heir of Potter should have been given to him for caretaking. The lord of the house always took precedence to everyone else. That it hadn't happened could mean only one thing. Harry Potter had been placed illegally with whoever he was living with at the moment. The guardianship, Adam started to say. Stolen by Albus Dumbledore, the clan leader answered grimly. Given I was out of touch with the British magical world for about 6 years after 1979, but I should have been contacted when James and Lily Potter died, and I should have had a say in where my heir would live. Adam could not fault the man his ire. He would have felt the same if it had been his heir who was kidnapped, and it had been a kidnapping, whatever the Ministry and Albus Dumbledore would say. Adam knew that the Lords of the Wizengamot would see it like that as well if it ever was brought to their attention. "Why did you wait that long to come to me?" Adam finally asked. "Even if you have not been in touch with the British magical world until Harry Potter was 5, you should have." There was a ward set up that prevented the asking of questions about where, and in what circumstances, the boy lived. The ward fell just a few days ago. Since then I have done everything I could to find out what happened to the heir of Potter. Adam frowned at that. He knew of wards that could do things like that, but he also knew that those wards were illegal as long as the individual they were attached to didn't know of them. There was just the question of if the boy knew, but that still didn't change the fact that the boy had been taken from his rightful guardian and then placed who knows where. "Is there anything else I should know?" Adam asked. Morganath took the folder on his desk and gave it to Adam. "These are the withdrawing of Harry Potter's vault while he lived with his Muggle relatives and while he was at school. There are also the account statements that tell you what was done with the money that had been withdrawn." The young-looking man handed over the file and Adam leafed through it. "As you can see, Harry's parents financed part of the war against Voldemort. The money should have been stopped being used like this after their death, but it wasn't." Morganath said. Adam frowned. The accounts clearly stated that Albus Dumbledore had continued to use the Potter's money to help with the aftermath of the war. Instead of leaving the rest of the meager amount of money for the child's care and schooling, he had used the money and forgotten to think about the child that had to live from it. The money the child's caretaker had been given had not even been enough to provide for the basic needs of the child. They had just been able to finance the young boy's schooling from it. As you can see, his misuse of Harry's money made him a burden for his caretakers. As far as I have found out so far, they resented him for it, the clan leader declared. The will of his parents clearly states that any and all money that is left after their death should solely be used for the caretaking of Harry and for his inheritance. Adam opened the next page of the file which showed the will of the parents. "I wish to press charges against Albus Dumbledore for neglecting the will of Lily and James Potter and stealing Harry Potter's money." Morganath said coolly, "I also wish to press charges for the kidnapping of an heir, neglecting said heir and misuse of power to legally gain access to said heir." "I understand," Adam answered. "Finally, I also want to press charges against everyone that used Harry Potter's name without my explicit permission." Morganath continued and handed him another folder. "In there are all the firms, authors, and products that have the Potter's heir's name without asking me. I am not really interested in the money, but I do not like it that they use Harry Potter's name without permission." Adam took the folder also. "I guess you will also press charges against the Daily Prophet," he said. The young lord smiled. "Something like that," he answered, and then continued to fill Adam in. Now, about 3 months later, Adam met Morganath again in the depth of Gringotts. This time, the boy-looking man was already there when Adam was brought into the room. Adam bowed. The clan leader inclined his head and then gestured to the seat in front of his desk. Adam sat. "I have some news for you, my lord," he told the Potter Lord, instantly. "The Daily Prophet is now operating under a new guideline, so we finally have had enough shareholders to overthrow the ministry control?" Morganath asked. Adam just snorted. "More than enough," he said. "With the backing of the Longbottom and Flamel families and the Malfoys, the ministry had no chance to continue with its drivel. You already had 22% of the stockings under the names of Potter, Grimm, Evans, Peverell and Emrys. With the backing of the 5% of Flamel and the 3% of Longbottom, you would have had a draw with the ministry." Adding to the fact that now the Malfoys 5% and the Malfoys 20% are backing you, the Ministry has had no chance at all. The answer was a satisfied smirk. So the Daily Prophet would finally stop printing gossip, Morganath said, satisfied. Adam inclined his head. I just wonder how you got the Malfoys and Malfoys to cooperate, he said. The answer was a smile. The Malfoys would have always cooperated. Morganath said, their shares just had to wait until I was able to purchase Grim, Evans, Peverell and Emrys. Adam had the dawning impression that Morganath hadn't told him everything when he took the job. He sighed. You were a Slytherin when you went to Hogwarts, weren't you? He asked, exasperated. The answer was a laugh. Actually, I was sorted into Gryffindor, Morganath replied, and Adam groaned. Oliver Twist was right, he moaned. There were Slytherins in Gryffindor all along. The answer was a laugh. Just protect my interest and I won't out-Slytherin your Slytherin mind, Morganath promised. And that comes from a Gryffindor, Adam retorted without heat. Then he sobered up. Fudge tried to intimidate the Quibbler. He threatened Xenophilius Lovegood with Azkaban if he didn't stop printing Twist and didn't tell him who Twist is. The answer was a grim smile. It seems that Fudge prefers to work into my hands, Morganath said. The moment he makes a move against the Quibbler, confront him and tell him we will sue him if he doesn't keep his nose out of a private business. James Potter, Zeno Lovegood and Salvatio Malfoy were the first and only shareholders of the Quibbler. The families didn't change even if James Potter is dead now. I'm sure that Fudge won't like what hits him if he tries to cross those families. Adam's eyebrows shot up when he heard that. He had known of the Potter and Lovegood holdings of the Quibbler, but he hadn't been able to find out the third. Malfoy? He asked. The answer was a predatory smile. My name was Morganath's reply, and Adam shivered. He didn't envy Fudge, who had managed to enrage that individual in front of him. Morganath's eyes said it all. You do not cross Morganath, and if Morganath's original name was Salvatio Malfoy, then you would do your damn best to stay away from him as well. Fudge would not know what hit him when Morganath was finally ready to strike. The room Severus Snape was brought to by the goblin was simple. There were some leather chairs and a desk out of dark wood. The room had no windows, and the walls were covered by the same dark wood the desk was made of. The floor was made of stone and candles were the only light in the room. He shuddered. He still couldn't believe that he had taken the chance and activated the letter that had been sent to him by the unknown head of house, or at least at that time unknown head of house. The room was darkly lit and a young man was waiting for him. Said man leaned against the desk, his arms crossed, clearly waiting for him. When Severus landed with his portkey, there had been an odd silence in the room, somehow disconcerting. Severus had spent all day until then stalking the halls and making Gryffindor miserable. He had taken far more points from Gryffindor than they had lost over the last 2 months from all the teachers combined, just to come here and stare into a face that for a moment looked like Potter's. Then reality set in and he could see the differences that he hadn't seen a second before. This stranger in front of him didn't have glasses and his face was far more regal than Potter's could ever be. Severus would have guessed they were the same age, but Potter's eyes, like those of every student Severus had ever taught, looked innocent and young. The eyes that now looked back at him were ancient, but they had the same color, Severus noted. For a moment Severus hesitated, then he bowed slowly. He had never been truly taught how to behave in the situation he was now, but he at least knew the basics thanks to his 7 years in Slytherin. My lord, he greeted, while hoping that this man wasn't as sadistic as the Dark Lord. Severus's back and limbs still ached from his visit yesterday morning, the morning after the failed raid at Azkaban. He had been there for the meeting, and had taken the brunt of the Dark Lord's ire, just because he hadn't been there for the raid. Cool green eyes assessed him. Take a seat, you are trembling, was the cool reply. Severus felt himself stiffen when he heard that assessment. How? He knew for a fact that he had learned to fool even Dumbledore, so how? You are my heir, as long as you have neither accepted nor declined your position in my house, but are in my territory. I maintain the ability as your lord to measure your health by the feeling your proximity gives me. I can basically taste how you feel. The last sentence was spoken sardonically. Not that I need it. Severus shivered at that. It was disconcerting that the man seemed to be able to know even what he was thinking. A simple legilimens, the man said. Your shields are good, very good, but not good enough for me. The next thing Severus knew, he had drawn his wand on the stranger. Before he could utter a word, the wand flew from his hands to the hands of his opponent. Good reflexes, the man commented. I was not as quick as you at your age. Then the man tilted his head in thought. But then I didn't have a wand to draw at your age, so maybe I was and simply don't know it. Who are you? Severus stared at the man, totally confused. The man looked like a boy but treated Severus like a child. Severus could see the power of the man in those things he had told Severus. But at the same time, the man hadn't made any move that would threaten him in any way. Well, he had taken Severus's wand. That was the second his wand was returned to him with a snorted catch. Severus caught his wand and stared at the Potter look-alike, and at the same time not look-alike, in further confusion. Sit before you fall, the man commented and pointed at the seat in front of the desk he was leaning against. Severus sat. I'm not sure if you have had any formal training in your youth, so let's start with this question, before I answer yours. Were you taught how to act in a meeting to potentially enter a grand family? Severus sneered. No, I wasn't, he finally answered sincerely. Since the other one had told him that he could read Severus's thoughts, and Severus's frantic search for a hole in his shields had not yet turned up anything, Severus figured that the man would know anyway if he lied. The man just nodded. Then I will treat this meeting a little bit more informal, he said. I am Salvasaha. Since I'm here to ask you if you are interested in entering my grand family, I fear I am traditionally not allowed to tell you my last name. After all, you have to decide if you can accept my orders, and not if the family name is interesting enough for you to say yes anyway. Shouldn't you be disguised if you want your identity kept hidden? Severus returned with a sneer. The answer was a laugh. If I was known in the political area, I would be. Since I am not, why should I? You won't be able to speak of me anyway when you leave this room, no matter if you accept or decline, was the answer. Severus's lips thinned again. And how will you keep me from telling about— There's a curse on the portkey that brought you, Salvasaha said. It's basically a runic tongue-tie curse or obliviate, based on your decision in here. If you decline, you will forget that you have ever been invited. Severus was impressed. He had never heard of such a spell, but the cool, sincere eyes of his opponent told him that he wasn't being lied to. I have no interest in serving a third master, Severus finally said. The answer was a shrug. I wouldn't be your master, Salvasaha said. I would be your head of house. I don't see a difference, Severus countered. The answer was a laugh. Unlike those masters you are talking about, I would be responsible for your well-being. I can't hurt you, not that I want it. I might be able to order you, but I will also shield you if you need shielding, aid you if you need aiding, and heal you if you need healing. Severus just scoffed at that tiredly. He had heard too many empty promises in his life to simply believe this man in front of him. I am already doing everything I can for the war. I am not willing to submit to a Potter look-alike to do even more, he finally forced out. Look for your spy elsewhere. Tom Marvolo Riddle, the Dark Lord, raided Azkaban on Halloween night, the night between the day before yesterday and yesterday. To be precisely, the raid didn't go as planned. Instead of returning from Azkaban with his most faithful Death Eaters and a contract with the Dementor Coven, he only returned with his faithful, some of them in an even worse condition than they had been while being imprisoned in Azkaban. Severus could just stare at Salvasaha, said man shrugged. You were punished yesterday morning after you were called. Riddle used his ire for his failed mission on you. His army isn't as big now as he hoped for. That doesn't mean that he gave up on the prophecy in the Department of Mysteries. Well, do you truly think I need a spy in Riddle's ranks? Severus guessed that the other man truly didn't need a spy if he knew all that already. That doesn't mean you don't want me to spy on the headmaster, Severus countered. Albus Dumbledore is concerned about Harry Potter. The boy doesn't act like Dumbledore thinks he should, and he asked Mad-Eye Moody to look into it. There's also the shifts he is delegating the Order members to do in the Department of Mysteries. Absolutely balmy, that one. As long as Riddle doesn't enter the Ministry himself, or Harry Potter isn't tricked into going there, there is no one who can take that prophecy from the shelf. He's also trying to recruit new members for his order. Do you need anything else? Severus stared at the man in front of him. If you can get all that information without me, why do you want me to join your family? Severus finally asked hesitatingly. The answer was a shrug. You're a child of my adopted son's blood, which makes you my child. Even if I despised you with all my heart, I still would ask you if you want to be a part of my family. I still would protect you. Salvazar answered, shrugging. It's the least I can do. Severus frowned, but the other one wasn't done yet. This isn't servitude, Severus, he said. A grand family is for protection. Of course it is your choice. Just consider how it will end for you now, when the war finally ends. You will be either dead or imprisoned for life. I don't think that the headmaster. Severus started to object, but the other one overruled him. If you aren't killed by either side for either betrayal or because you aren't useful anymore, and if you survive the battles you will have to fight for either side, the headmaster would keep you at Hogwarts even after the war. He might have influence, but he is old and his influence is dwindling. He might be able to rescue you from Azkaban, but it will be likely that you would be stuck for the rest of your life as a teacher. After all, the Wizengamot will be more easily persuaded in letting you go if you are still somewhere you are monitored. And the headmaster wouldn't let you go without a fight, because it is nearly impossible to get a potions master with your salary to work in a school. Is that truly what you want? Severus grimaced. And if the headmaster dies, there's a huge chance that you will end up in Azkaban. After all, there is no one who trusts you now, and it's the headmaster who kept you out of it the first time around. Without his help, there won't be a lot of people inclined to help you. Severus imagined Potter as the winner of the war and the one who would be revered by the other wizards and witches after it. Severus would have no chance. He would be in prison before he could even utter the word spy. After all, everyone knew that Harry Potter hated him with passion. Severus grimaced again. He had never seen his future as clearly as he had done just now. It wasn't a pleasant future. Death seemed the best ending he could imagine, and that was definitely a depressing thought. Like I said, it is your decision, Salvazar said softly. Severus glared. And if I join you, what will be expected of me? He finally asked. The answer was a smile. There are a few rules I would like you to follow if you join. Other than that, there's nothing more expected. I don't care what you do for a living, who you believe in, or who you want to marry. At that, Severus grimaced. I don't plan on marrying ever, he confessed, knowing that the other would have read it in his thoughts either way. Like I said, that's your decision. And what rules will I have to follow if I join? Severus asked, sure that he would now find out the trap behind the offer. Unity of the grand family in public. You may hate each other all you like when you're in private, but as long as you are in public, you stand behind family. The straightforward answer definitely baffled him. I also would expect you submit to a health test. You will be tested for potions or spells. Reasonable. Surprisingly reasonable. Another non-negotiable rule for the others that still can't do it would be to learn to occlude their mind. Since you already can do it, I won't insist on it this time, but if you want to, I can teach you how to strengthen your shields. Severus nodded at that. It was reasonable. Occlumency, after all, helped against possession, compulsion charms, or imperious. And lastly, the family comes first. I don't care what you believe. I don't care if you're light or dark, but I care if you decide to follow another man like little ducklings, unable to think for yourselves. If you join my family, your loyalty will be to your family. You might admire someone else, someone like Albus Dumbledore or whoever, but you won't follow them blindly. The family comes first. Work with them, admire them for all I care, but you will always think what your actions will do to the family name, Salvazar said. What about? Severus stopped there, but his hand automatically cradled his left arm. The boyish-looking man's eyes darkened. I will remove it, he said. If you want to continue spying for now, I won't stop you. I can place that thing on a bracelet for now. so that you can still be summoned with it, and I can teach you an illusion. Riddle wouldn't even think about searching for so that it looks as if that thing is still there. But if you join, it's gone. I don't mind the dark as long as you don't endanger life. Life is precious. But in my eyes, Tom Riddle is at fault for the murder of some of our family members. I can't condone that. Severus frowned at that. Family members? He asked hesitatingly. Gideon and Fabian Pruitt, the other man elaborated. Alice and Frank Longbottom. Lily. At that Severus's eyes sharpened. Lily? He repeated. As in Lily Evans? The answer was a laugh from Salvazar. Lily LeFay, he corrected Severus. And Severus felt himself deflate a little, at least until Salvazar added, Evans might have been her official last name in the mundane world, but she has always been a LeFay by blood. You're telling me Lily and I were related? Severus asked sharply. The answer was a shrug. Very distantly you were, yes. But then it would have been near enough that I would have invited her into the family anyway. What about her boy? Severus had wanted to stop that question, but he couldn't even if he wanted. Of course he despised the boy. But on the other hand, the boy's safety was his only goal in life right now. He wanted the child to live for Lily. No, he needed the child to live for Lily. I can neither deny nor confirm those who haven't already joined this alliance, Salvazar finally answered. Now Severus Tobias Snape, will you join this grand family? And Severus knew that his time asking questions was up. He hesitated just for a second. Lucius Malfoy was shivering when he finally entered Gringotts via Portkey. His limbs were weak and he wasn't in the pristine condition he had hoped to arrive. But the Dark Lord had interrupted him shortly before he could leave, and Lucius had again felt the man's ire. The man had not been amused about the newest article in the Quibbler. Why, Lucius, didn't you stop this article? The insane man had wanted to know. After the last one you should have understood that this brat can't be allowed to continue with this drivel. He'll destroy everything we worked for if he continues. The Crucius afterwards hadn't convinced Lucius to do as the Dark Lord pleased, but had instead cemented his decision, so Lucius had portkeyed to Gringotts. In the dark room he landed in, another man had been waiting for him already. Said man was young with dark hair and oddly familiar. I'm surprised that you came, Lucius, the man said. After last time and your unwillingness to even cooperate with me as your head of house, I had guessed you wouldn't accept the invite today. Lucius's eyes widened. My lord, he said, and then bowed stiffly, suppressing a hiss of pain while doing so. Sit down before you fall down, Lucius, Salvazar replied and gestured to the chair in front of the desk he was leaning on. Sharp eyes ghosted over Lucius' pale features. It seems Riddle has decided to dish out the Cruciatus like Dumbledore dishes out candy. Lucius grimaced at that comparison. I'm not quite sure what to think, considering you just compared the darkest wizard of today's times with our lightest, he finally settled on saying. I think that comparison might be a little bit extreme, my lord. The answer was a careful shrug. Nevertheless true, Lucius, he said, and that told Lucius a lot about the grand family he had been offered to enter. No Dumbledore, no Dark Lord. It sounded oddly pleasant. Lucius settled into the chair in front of the desk. I'm listening, my lord, he said stiffly while following the protocol that existed for occasions like that. The answer was a smirk, and then the other began to talk. There was no flowery speech like the Dark Lord had used when he had convinced Lucius to join him. There were no threats. The Lord in front of him just stated the bare facts. The rules and conditions for the grand family. Somehow Lucius appreciated that. He was far too hurt and tired to play a political game right now. True, the man in front of him was no Dark Lord with enigmatic aura. He was also no Dumbledore with power oozing from every pore. The man in front of him was something else instead. He was truthful to Lucius. Genuine, and Lucius suddenly found himself appreciating this character trait more than he would have thought. Harry was slowly making his way back to the common room when he suddenly was shoved into an empty, dusty classroom to his left. He was thrown against one of the walls and held there by the throat. Harry flinched violently. His whole body was still in agony from the nearly deadly ritual he had done yesterday night, and even if he was good at hiding it, he couldn't hide it fully. A wand was pressed against his throat. "Who are you?" a voice growled. Harry knew that voice. Moody. The old Auror finally had found a hint that he wasn't who he seemed to be. Nothing surprising there. Harry had just waited until the paranoid man would catch on. There had been no way of hiding the differences from the man after he had been set onto Harry by the headmaster. There was just one way to maybe get out of this mess with his skin intact. It was a bit risky considering his state of health, but it also was the only way. Harry stopped moving so that the Auror would not think about using a curse against him when he answered the question. "You should use Veritaserum on me," he suggested. 4 drops, just to make sure. Moody scrutinized his victim. He had watched the boy for a long time. Of course he had not known the boy before, but he still could see that something was off. The boy was nothing like Albus Dumbledore had described him. When Albus had talked about the boy, it had sounded like a rebellious teen, but the boy Moody met wasn't a rebellious teen at all. He might act like one and fool the others to think he was, but behind the facade was a cunning mind. "You do not sound very worried, impostor." Moody grunted. "I am not," the boy said, shrugging. "While my secrets do not hurt me, they just might hurt you." Moody looked at the boy with searching eyes. "And where do you think I will get Veritaserum from?" he asked finally. "I have some," the boy answered. "It is sufficient, I believe." Moody just snorted. "As if you would give me real Veritaserum. You are an Auror. You know the effects of it, and you have seen it often enough to tell if someone is faking its effects, I believe." The boy answered. Moody just snorted. "And of course you want me to release you so that you can get it out?" "My wand holsters are on both of my wrists," the boy answered him sincerely. "I do have some weapon holsters on my belt, just take them." Moody blinked. Normally he had to persuade his victims to tell him where their weapons were. He slowly reached for the boy's wrists and discovered the holsters. He took them, 4 holsters, 4 wands. After that he reached for the belt and just took it away together with the weapons on it. On the belt there were also a lot of vials. Moody recognized the most of them as healing potions. One of them also was the truth serum. When he had the weapons, he searched the boy for other hidden weapons. He found nothing. So he finally stepped back, his wand lowered a little bit. While he watched the boy with his magical eye, he looked through the potions the boy had carried. On the stopper of the vials were the initials of the potion master engraved. Moody knew all initials of legitimized potion masters by heart. He had learned them for his work. On the stoppers were engraved the golden initials C. Eli. This surprised Moody. He knew the engraving. It was an old one, and no one knew when the potion master had done his mastery. There had never been a date of death, and so the engraving had continued. Sometimes there were people who had a vial from the mysterious potion master, but he had never seen a potion's equipment solely engraved with these initials, and there was no way these initials could be falsified. There was a curse on them that enabled just the potion master they belonged to use them. Moody checked the potions and found them all sealed, so they were the real deal. Moody took the Veritaserum and broke the seal with a little bit of regret. The potions of Cello were some of the best on the market, and they were rare. It nearly felt like destroying something holy to break one of their seals. "Well, open up, lad," he said to the boy who had not moved at all. The boy sat down on the floor and did as he was told. Moody did not fault the boy for sitting down. Veritaserum did disable your ability to stay on your feet, and Moody also hadn't missed the slight flinch of the boy when he was pressed against the wall. The boy was hurt. Moody had no idea how it happened, but it was nevertheless true. Either he has a high pain tolerance, is trained in occlumency, or isn't hurt too badly, Moody guessed while he dropped 4 drops in the open mouth of the boy. He assumed the last. The Veritaserum hit the boy's tongue. It took just seconds. Then the boy's eyes glassed over. "Definitely the best Veritaserum you could get on the market." "State your name," Moody said. Harry felt the potion compelling him to tell the truth, but it didn't compel him to say a specific name. It seemed that Salvatio Malfoy was as true for the truth serum as Salvatio Emrys, Salazar Enriz, Salazar Slytherin, or Harry Potter. Well, Moody already knew Harry's name. There would be no way he would get another without a little work, but then the Aurora deserved a little headache for the way he had handled Harry. Harry James Salvatore Amethyst Potter, Harry said, even while drugged, spitting the third name he mentioned. The moment he was rid of Dumbledore and Voldemort, he would rip Sirius Black apart for giving him a girl's name at birth. Had that mangy mutt been drunk while naming him? But then, Harry had the feeling he knew exactly where that name had come from. Moody meanwhile blinked. That wasn't the answer he had expected to get. Harry James Potter had been one option. Every other name in history another, at least as long as there was no Potter or Harry to find in it anywhere. He sighed. How old are you? He finally asked. 15. The answer was instant. A real 15-year-old portraying another 15-year-old? Normally 15-year-olds were far too prone to mess things up in the plan, and the ward had been far too complicated for a mere 15-year-old. His opponent must be lying. Moody picked up the bottle of Veritaserum and read the label. No, still truth serum. He sighed and decided a different approach. When were you born? 31st of July 1980, the boy answered again without hesitation. Moody again looked at the bottle. Still Veritaserum. Did that mean that boy was Potter? Are you Harry Potter? He asked again. This boy couldn't be. No, the boy answered, and Moody huffed. It seemed that he finally got somewhere. Where is Harry Potter? Moody asked. This time there was no answer. The boy just blinked, a sign that the question couldn't be answered by the other. Moody frowned. It had been a straightforward question, so why couldn't the imposter with the frightening similar name answer? So he had to take another way to find out what the imposter was hiding. What are your plans? Going to Gryffindor Tower and after that to dinner? That wasn't the answer Moody had been waiting for. It seemed as if he had been too unspecific. Answers like that always happened if the questions were too open. He frowned inwardly and then asked again, "What are your plans for the future?" That should be better. Finding my book about Hogwarts, searching objects, working, traveling, staying away from throne. Stop! Moody blinked at that but dismissed the answers he had gotten. They weren't useful at all. He needed to know about the current plans for the school. What are your current plans concerning school? Finishing my AOLs. Not exactly the answer Moody had been hoping for. He groaned. Do you give answers like that deliberately? He asked, frustrated. Yes, Harry answered, still drugged. I don't give anything away for free. I noticed, Moody growled. Then he returned to his first approach. Tell me everything you know about what happened with Harry Potter. This time the answer would turn his world around. He was created on Halloween 1981 by Albus Dumbledore and died the next morning. He was recreated in August 1985 by Petunia Dursley for school. He died on the 2nd of August this year, the boy in front of Moody answered. It was then that Moody's world came crashing down. He knew what that answer meant. He himself had given something similar to it when he had been asked under the influence of Veritaserum about Mad-Eye Moody. Albus Dumbledore had done more than hiding away the child. He had tried, even if Moody was sure that it wasn't deliberately, to change the child's name. There was just one thing that Moody had to ask to confirm his suspicion. You found out your true name this summer. For a second there was silence. Then the boy answered. Yes, he said. Albus Dumbledore didn't tell you it, Moody guessed. Yes? Is that the reason why you are different from what Albus described? Moody asked. This time, surprisingly, a small smile started to grace the youth's face. Partly, the boy said. What is the other reason? I am no weapon, the boy answered instantly, and his eyes were oddly clear for Veritaserum. He has done nothing but meddle his whole life without ever thinking about the consequences of his actions. It's time that someone stops him before he destroys us all. It's thanks to Albus Dumbledore that a lot of people were rescued. And yet it is thanks to him that the war happened in the first place, the boy answered. I'm not naive. I saw him working on taking down a Dark Lord. If we continue down his path, there would be thousands and thousands of dead on our side. Moody's eyes widened when the boy suddenly stood up. The child's body was trembling, but the boy had full control over it. Otherwise, I give you the same data I gave Severus Snape. Albus Dumbledore knew Grindelwald since he was 17 and knew what that madman planned, yet the first time he acted was when he was 60. I don't blame him for not fighting, I blame him for keeping his silence. Albus Dumbledore also knew about Tom Riddle when that boy was still in school, yet he simply watched again. Do you see a pattern? Think about it. With that, the boy coughed and turned away from Moody. He still wasn't fast enough for Moody not to see the blood on the child's lips. Moody's eyes narrowed. What happened to you, Potter? He asked. The boy turned halfway back from putting back on his holsters and belt and smiled a faint smile. Just a minor hurt considering what I endured while attending Hogwarts from year 1 to 4, he answered. Definitely less deadly than basilisk venom coursing through my body. Moody growled. That's not an answer, Potter, Moody said. The boy shrugged. It's part of the price I paid to destroy Riddle, he answered. The odds are well that I won't die for now at least. An odd feeling of concern followed that statement, and for a moment Moody wasn't sure what to reply. You shouldn't even joke about your death, lad, he finally declared. The answer was a smile full of bloody teeth. Why not? At least like that I would die to my terms and not at the bidding of our most beloved headmaster. The last words he said slowly, as if he was considering each carefully. I have an odd feeling that that's one of the things the headmaster definitely planned for me. But if you don't believe me, ask the headmaster himself. Ask him who his little weapon is going to be. Ask him if he truly raised me as a pig for slaughter. Then he bowed. I'm on my way now, Lord Moody, he said. Have a nice day. And with that he left the classroom. Moody's eyes followed him while Moody's mind repeated everything Albus Dumbledore had ever said about Harry Potter. The lad was right. Albus had long since planned Potter's course of action. Albus himself had called the child weapon. Albus always insisted that Harry would be the one to finish off the Dark Lord. Moody felt sickened to the core. Hermione had struggled with her apology. Not because she couldn't see Harry's point of view, but because she felt guilty for acting the way she did in the first place. Harry always had been her best friend. Losing him because of her own actions had been hard. But she had experienced it before. Being admonished by him before he stopped talking to her had been new, and his words had definitely driven home his point. So she stopped next to Harry at the table in the common room the evening 2 days after Halloween. She knew that Harry had just come back from who knew where, but this time around she wouldn't pry. Harry, she said tentatively. I wanted to talk to you. Do you have some time for me? The answer was a sigh. Then Harry sat down his quill and looked up. Have a seat, please, he said, and Hermione sat still fidgeting. I'm sorry, she blurted out. Truly, Harry, I'm so sorry. I should have talked to you. You were right, and Just tell me, why did you do it? Harry interrupted her coolly, and Hermione slumped. Hermione stopped and huffed, frustrated. It seemed the right thing to do at that time, she finally explained. You didn't behave like you did normally, and I feared that something had happened, and well, Dumbledore is one of the most powerful wizards of our time. That doesn't explain why you went behind my back and talked to him, Harry commented, and he was right. It explained nothing. Well, Hermione snapped her mouth shut. Then she sighed. I was sure you wouldn't listen. Like you didn't listen when I expressed my concern about the firebolt. Harry tilted his head. You never tried to explain that to me either, he said, and leaned back in his chair. Hermione saw him wince when he did so, and her eyes narrowed. Then her focus snapped back to the discussion. You wouldn't have listened. You just saw the firebolt, she said. Harry raised an eyebrow. So you think I, who was forced to endure death threats because of people not listening to me since I was 11, wouldn't have believed you if you told me my life was at stake? He snorted, amused. Hermione, do you truly think I craved the danger I was in every year? Hermione blushed, embarrassed. No, she said. After that silence reigned between them. I'm sorry, she finally repeated, and Harry inclined his head. I forgive you, he finally said, but I won't forget. If you ever dare to do something like that again, don't expect me to be so lenient again." Hermione hesitated. Then she nodded. "Thank you," she said before hesitating again. What happened to you?" Harry just raised an eyebrow. "I'm quite sure that you have lost the right to pry the moment you went to the headmaster to tattle on me," he answered and returned to his homework. Hermione pressed her lips together but finally nodded. "Sorry," she said again. May I join you?" Harry shrugged, wincing at the gesture. "Do as you please," he answered, and Hermione pulled out her own homework. She still watched her best friend while she worked. He was moving stiffly, and it looked sometimes as if he was in pain. But his words had told her that he wouldn't answer her question, something that hurt and also concerned her greatly. But before she could do something else rash, Neville and Ron joined them at the table. Both of the other boys pulled out their homework and started to work on it. It was them complaining about Ebenbild and asking Harry about this or that in the defense curriculum they should have learned that finally sparked her idea. For a moment she still hesitated. She had been accepted back just now, after all, but then she plunged ahead anyway. "Harry, have you ever thought about teaching the other students defense? I mean, you are very good in it, and with Voldemort back we need to practice as much as we can." Harry just raised an eyebrow. "And your suggestion is?" "We should form a defense club behind Umbridge's back," she answered enthusiastically. "Let's ask the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs and the rest of the Gryffindors we know and trust to join. And maybe, so she thought, it would help Harry to overcome his trauma of Cedric's death and the Dementors in the summer." Harry frowned. "I've already a very full schedule, Hermione," he said. "But this is important, Harry." Hermione insisted. "We need to be able to defend us when Voldemort returns to the open, and considering that the Ministry tries to stifle our knowledge, someone else will have to teach us, and you can do it, I am sure." Harry sighed and leaned back again, with a wince. Hermione saw Neville's eyes narrow at that, but the other boys said nothing. "Please, Harry, at least consider it," she pleaded. "It would be a good idea," Ron murmured at that moment. "I would definitely feel safer if I knew that I know how to defend myself." Neville nodded. "I mean, we're trying to learn what we should have learned by ourselves, but it would be a lot easier if there was a group to learn with." At that, Harry sighed again. "All right," he said, "I will consider it." And Hermione smiled, not knowing that she had played into Harry's hands by her suggestion. It wasn't what he had originally planned, but it would work better this way. Pause. Past timeline, somewhere in year 1385 AD. Pause. The door opened. "Who are you?" The man who had been spoken to started. He had been concentrating on the thing in his arms and nearly had forgotten that he had knocked on the door in front of him. "Who I am isn't important," the man said while looking up to meet startling green eyes with his warm brown ones. "It is why I am here. That is the important part." The other man's eyes narrowed, but he complied nevertheless with the silent demand. "Then why are you here?" he asked. "I'm here because I know you can help me," the first man answered. "I heard that you have been looking for something discreetly for some years now." The other man's eyes widened and his eyes snapped to the thing in the stranger's arms. Then his expression closed off. "I'm not sure if you know." "I know exactly what you're looking for," the first man intercepted. "So, what's the catch?" "Hopefully," the first man said, his expression darkening. "There is no catch. He had risked too much to lose now, after all, his sanity, but more importantly, the sanity of the one person he still considered something akin to a brother, even after all those years apart. There is always a limit for every person. If that limit is overstepped, the person will break. No one in the entire world can bear everything thrown at them without being broken by one thing or the other. The moment Sal destroyed the Horcrux of his brother, Sal reached his limit, and when the statue of his brother far away in Hogwarts shattered and his ashes added to the wind, Sal's soul shattered as well. He had killed his brother. A child's laughter filling his head, originating in one of his memories. He had killed his brother. A child's eyes, filled with love, looking at him from a moment long ago lost in time. He had killed his brother. A single tear escaped his eyes. How could he? The answer came in the coldness of his own voice. A memory from a time long gone. I had other responsibilities than watching him lead his life, he had said. Other responsibilities. As if his brother had been nothing but a burden. Could he have stopped it? If he had listened, if he had stayed at his brother's side, could he have saved him? You show remarkably little interest in the life of your brother, Antioch had said. I would never have gotten away with such a behavior. You're just like father, Midrod had hissed. You do nothing but cast me away for others. And his brother was right. Others had always come first. Strangers he had aided. His brother instead he had killed. A healer cannot fight, a voice from another lifetime ago told him softly, his own voice. And you want to fight? No, I want to protect. And protected he had, always and always. Everyone without exception, and yet the greatest exception of all. I should have protected my brother, he whispered, while staring at the shards of the Horcrux in his hands, blind to the snowstorm that had started to rage in the wilderness of the French forest where he sat, unprotected on the ground. I should have protected my brother. Instead, he had killed him. You act as if you think this is easy for me to do. Sal heard his own past voice exclaim, I once swore to protect the innocents. I never thought that this oath would mean that I once would be forced to go against my own little brother. I love you, Midrod. If the circumstances would have been just the slightest bit different, if you just hadn't gone against everything I stand for, I would have chosen you. But as it is, I can't, not with the knowledge of what you have done. And he had turned away from his brother again, just for others. Strangers. You show remarkably little interest in the life of your brother. I would never have gotten away with such a behavior. So you will protect those who cannot protect themselves from those who try to maim them. I will. And then he had killed his brother. Killed him, deliberately. Killed him in cold blood. You're just like father. You do nothing but cast me away for others. And you will use all your skills to aid whomever needs help. He had sworn and he had kept his oath. Always and always. He had been a guardian to those who needed it. A child's laughter in his head. Guardian for all but his brother. He had been a healer, so you prefer murdering him just to stop him. A healer to all but his brother. A protector. There is no other way. Even if he would be one of us, even if he would be my own child, I would nevertheless say the same. A protector to all but his brother. A saint in the eyes of many, and yet he had killed his brother, his own baby brother, and his mind kept playing all those times he had interacted with the child he had killed today. I had other responsibilities than watching him lead his life, he had said instead. Other responsibilities. You show remarkably little interest in the life of your brother. I would never have gotten away with such a behavior. You're just like father. You do nothing but cast me away for others. Even if you will have to aid your enemy. Oh, how he wished he would have had to aid his enemy. Anything would have been better than what he had done. But he had forsworn himself. He had forsworn evil, but not the darkness. But his brother. I might love you, Midrod, but the oath I took as a guardian forces me to work against you. I can't let you roam the world like you are just now. I am sorry. So you prefer murdering him just to stop him? There is no other way. Even if he would be one of us, even if he would be my own child, I would nevertheless say the same. As if his brother was nothing to him. Even if you must kill someone or let someone die to ensure the safety of others. He had said yes to that as well, and he had damned himself with it. Even if you must kill someone, his brother's blood on his hands, his brother's soul destroyed, his brother's body nothing but ashes. To ensure the safety of others, how had he managed it? How had he managed to do as he had sworn when it had been his brother's life at stake? How had he been able to sacrifice his brother's life for something as shallow as the safety of others? Antioch, Cadmus, Ignotus, children, all three of them. Antioch sailing through the air and landing on the ground with a sickening thunk. Another curse and Antioch started to scream in agony. A child's laughter filling his head, originating in one of his memories, even if you must kill someone. A rune-based shield that rescued Cadmus and Ignotus from the deadly curses that were shot at them. In the end, Ignotus had lost a finger and was lying next to Cadmus, both of them unconsciousness. A child's eyes filled with love, looking at him from a moment long ago lost in time. Even if you must kill someone to ensure the safety of others. The icy steel of a short blade in his lung. Tainted, somehow unhealthy, perverted magic surrounding his brother. Maniac cackles. Not his brother. Not his brother. Even if it will bring you harm. Yes, his voice had been so sure that time, so sure that he could bear it, but he had had no idea what it meant to be harmed back then. So you prefer murdering him just to stop him? There is no other way. Even if he would be one of us, even if he would be my own child, I would nevertheless say the same. And he had done it. Mercilessly. Stone-heartedly. He opened his eyes. Midrod's dying scream filled the air, then he slowly but surely turned into stone. Another tear slit down his pale cheek and his hands loosened on the tainted and shattered thing that was once the Horcrux of his brother. I might love you, Midrod, but the oath I took as a guardian forces me to work against you. I can't let you roam the world like you are just now. I am sorry. Merciless. Stone-hearted. Unwilling to lift a finger to rescue his brother. And with that the frail grasp soul still had on his broken mind, and magic slipped. Instantly white flames of magic burned the wood of the forest surrounding him. Fire hot with his self-loathing. Fire icy with his hate, directed at no one but himself. The snow of the storm melted under its pressure. Healer. Guardian. Protector. Nothing mattered. There was just one thing: he was a murderer. His brother's murderer. And with that, the flames surrounding him finally found their goal and burned him alive. At least he could judge himself now with the same magic that had just moments ago ended the life of his baby brother. Saul did not hope for mercy. He had not earned it in any way or form. The agony of his burning flesh was the least he deserved. Then I bless you, child. You are a healer, you are a warrior, you are a guardian. You have finished your apprenticeship, and you have chosen your path. May you heal others. May you judge their hearts. May you guide others. May you protect them from harm. Today I name you a guardian healer, born to protect, born to judge, born to heal. So mote it be. Far away at Hogwarts, a vampire stumbled to his feet. He had been hiding in the farthest corner of the library, hoping that he would have some peace and quiet there. Why, oh why had he had to promise his overbearing great-grandparents to visit regularly when they met the last time around? He had planned to hide away in the library from them for at least the majority of the day, but something had happened, something bad. And so he stumbled to his feet, and then hurried out of the library. He had nearly reached the entrance door when two arms slung around him and stopped his run. "Don't," his great-grandfather's voice said, burdened with sorrow. "There is nothing we can do." Anastasius grabbed his great-grandfather's hands to free himself, but the older male's grip was like iron. "Great-grandfather, please." And he could hear desperation and the same kind of sorrow in his voice that his great-grandfather's carried as well. "There is nothing we can do, child, nothing," was the choked and sorrowful answer. And then he could feel his great-grandfather burying his head in Anastasia's neck. That was the moment his great-grandmother reached the entrance hall. Her face was pale and she was looking as human as his great-grandfather and himself at the moment. Tear streaks adorned her cheeks, and when she saw them she came straight to them, her arms surrounding both of them without another word. "Why?" This time there was a mourning tone in Anastasia's voice. "Why?" "Because we are all doomed to fall one day," his great-grandfather answered. "And today was your father's day." Anastasius shook his head. "He's immortal. He can't die. He can't." "There are other ways for us immortal to die, but death," his great-grandmother whispered while drawing him closer. "And he has the blood of a basilisk. Our deaths are always the most gruesome." "No." This time Anastasius was able to shake of his great-grandfather's hands. But his great-grandmother still stood in his way, keeping him from hurrying to where his body told him his father once had been. "No. I'm sorry, child. I'm sorry." "No. He is a phoenix-born. A phoenix-born. He doesn't lose himself to insanity like the basilisk does. He is a phoenix-born." His great-grandmother just shook her head in sorrow. He has my gaze. He has my venom. He speaks my language, she said, and her voice was filled with bitterness and regret. The only thing he has of the phoenix are his tears. Phoenix-born he might be, but the basilisk is stronger in his blood. No. Again the hands of his great-grandfather embraced him. No. And then, like a wounded, devitalized animal, he fell to his knees while tears leaked from his eyes. No, please. I need him still. He can't be gone. He can't. He wouldn't leave me, he pleaded. His great-grandfather had sunken to the knees as well, still hugging Anastasius desperately. He was over 1,000 years old, already, his great-grandmother said softly while she crouched down in front of him. And unlike your great-grandfather and I, he has no one who belonged just to him. He is alone. But what about me? The answer was a bittersweet smile. You are an adult, Anastasius. You don't need him anymore. Your brother is long dead and your father's friends as well. 1,000 years, child, are a long time, even for immortal like us, his great-grandmother said softly. If it weren't for me, your great-grandfather might have given himself to the eternal flames already. If it wasn't for him, I would have long since gone insane. Even now I can feel my sanity fading. One day I won't be able to hold on anymore and I will forget that I once was a sentient being. Dying would be preferable to wasting away as a creature who can't remember its life and loved ones anymore. But Padre, whatever happened, his will to continue on broke. He is fading now, his great-grandfather said. Anastasius choked on his tears. Fading? Not gone, as of yet, his great-grandfather answered, but long since without our reach. Forgive me, child, but there's no one here who can bring him back. The only one who will be able to stop him from fading is himself. We're part of the immortal furball. Part of our curse is to be never allowed to ask him to decide differently. I'm not, Anastasius said again, fighting against his great-grandparents' grasp. My people die after about 800 years. We're not part of you, so I can ask. You drank his blood for the most of your childhood, child, his great-grandmother said. You might not be originally part of us immortals, but there is a reason why a vampire normally isn't able to consume another furbolg's blood, and why a young vampire nevertheless does. Vampire children are unable to grow without the model the blood it consumes provides. You might not be one of us, but your body is modeled after your father's, and he has a natural lifespan of about 2,000 years. So you, in a way, still belong to us. And that takes your right of objection. I'm not immortal. Your father isn't as well, his great-grandfather whispered. But that still doesn't change the fact that we can't force him to stay alive. It is his decision, and his alone. He choose to fade, let him go. To force him to live on, broken as he is, would be far crueler. And this time, Anastasius couldn't object. He knew that after some time, a featherball was set in his ways. If that featherball mentally broke, there was almost no way to fix him ever again. Anastasius loved his father dearly, and that was something he didn't want his father to be forced to suffer for eternity. So he simply broke down and cried in the end. Somewhere else in Britain, another man looked up when the soil of Great Britain shuddered under the pain of its magical ruler. The man was a very old man. His hair was grey and his eyes darkened by the weight of his nearly 700 years on earth, and yet there was still a chance for the man to live for another 200 or 300 years. It's time, a voice whispered in his mind, a voice that he had heard since the day his father died. You have my permission to reintroduce yourself. Again the soil shuddered at the pain of its magical ruler. The old man closed his eyes when he was assaulted by the agony of a being he hadn't seen since he had been a young man himself. He knew what he should do, what he had to do. He knew of the other's suffering and the pain the other had endured for long before even he was born, and he knew that it would be mercy to let the other die, and yet, "It's still not your time, Salazar," he whispered, his own tired eyes seeing the future clearly for the first and maybe the last time in his life. "It's still not your time." It was the pure blood, the Grim in his blood that told him. The Grim was Death's servant. It always knew, If it was time to die for somebody the old man had met or was tied to through bonds of family or friendship. Not yet, not for a very long time. The old man stood. "Grandfather?" a young boy asked, looking up at him startled. The boy had been playing with his father's cloak while the old man had watched him smiling before the world shifted. "Your grandfather has to go away for some time, James," the old man said. "Be a good boy and tell your father that I have left, will you?" "Yes, grandfather," the boy answered. Of course, he wasn't truly the grandfather of the child. More likely his great-great-great something grandfather. Somewhere on the way he had stopped to count and simply had insisted on being called grandfather. It had been easier that way, especially considering that his children's and children's children's span of life had shortened until they barely lived for 150 years. But that was the curse of a pure blood born like him. They might not live as long as their own parents, but their span of life was far longer than that of the average mixed-born or mundane. Even his son, a pure blood-born himself, had died some 200 years ago, and his family had long since forgotten how old he himself truly was. This had been freedom and a curse at the same time. "Don't wait for me, James," the old man said, ruffled the boy's hair, and then stepped out of the house. He looked up into the sky, then he closed his eyes and reached for the inheritance he had gained through his parents. The thunderbird in his blood cried. The Grimm howled. And he took their power and twisted it to fit his needs, and like the grim death omen that it was, his body dissolved into molecules. The wind that the thunderbird had summoned took them up and left with them, just to spit them out into the snowstorm in the middle of a forest in France. The place that he had landed in was burning hot with self-loathing and icy with hatred. White flames were consuming not only the trees themselves, but also the one who had called them in his agony. "It's still not your time, Salvazar," the man said, and green eyes snapped to his own. Their eyes met, warm brown eyes met, desperate, killing green. "Peveril?" The other's voice was nothing but a whispered pleading for familiarity. The old man smiled tiredly. "Long time no see, Salazar," he said softly, and then stepped into the flames. The flames withdrew from him, not willing to hurt him since their master was not willing to destroy another one of his loved ones any time soon. "How?" Salvazar whispered. "You should be dead." "Not yet," the old man said, dismissively. "If Rena wouldn't have fallen ill, she would be still alive as well. We are pure blood-born after all, or forcibly-born as you call it." The answer was a shudder. "If you're still alive, then why? Why did I never contact you?" The old man finished before answering the question as well. "Because I was an idiot, and thought that you would suffer even more if you had to watch me growing old and die while you still never aged a day." A lie, but those were the words that had been whispered to him by the wind. The answer was a startled laugh, dry and filled with flames as it was. "And I thought that I at least concealed that fact from you," Salvazar said while tears started to flow. The tears were burning with white flames, and their ashes left his cheeks painted black. It was then that the old man, Peveril, husband of Helga, reached him and knelt down in front of him. "I'm sorry for that, Salazar," the old man said tiredly. "I shouldn't have left you alone in your suffering." And he shouldn't have. He should have done what he thought was right, not what he was told to do. But Peveril had known his place on earth since he was a toddler. He was an instrument, and he had always been willing to submit himself to the one who loosely held his lashes. Salvazar had just shook his head. "There's nothing you could have done. There's nothing you can do. The deeds are done, and I destroyed the one that was once as dear to me as my own son, just because a foolish vow I once made, years ago," he answered, and new tears slipped down his cheeks. "I deserve to burn for eternity for what I have done. You're mortal. You're imperfect. Salvazar, I think you have forgotten that, even if you have lived for a longer time than even I, even if you have seen and done even more than I ever have or will do, in the end you still don't know everything. You will err on your way, you will choose the wrong path, you will hurt and be hurt, fail and be failed, and you will suffer for it. And maybe you're right, and the decision you made right now was a mistake. But maybe you weren't, and in the end it wasn't your fault that whatever happened happened." Salvasaha scoffed at that, and the white flames started to burn with newfound vengeance. "It was my decision. It was my fault," he said. "And I think your mind's far too broken to see things clearly. You're set in your ways, unable to change and unable to see that you're not an almighty God," Peveril said while smiling sadly. "And yet staying alive with a shattered mind like you are now will just lead you onto the path of no return. You will fall from the edge into the darkness if I let you be. I won't stay alive. I don't want to be alive anymore. Darkness can't claim me if I die." Salvasar hissed, and the white flames surrounding them reacted to his ire. "It's not your time," Peveril said. "Not yet. Not for a long time. I won't let you suffer insanity for the rest of your life." The answer was a bitter smile. "So what will you do? Try to reason with me that I didn't kill my brother?" Salvasaha held up the broken Horcrux. "Look at it. The last thing that kept my brother alive. It was I that destroyed it. It was my hands that have done the deed. Can you truly tell me with the evidence still in my hands that I wasn't the one who killed my brother?" Peveril looked down at the locket in Salvasaha's hands. Then Peveril's eyes searched for the deadly green of the man in front of him while he mentally reached out to touch the other man's mind. The barriers of the other one's mind were down, letting him in, showing him everything. It was more than Peveril had ever expected to see. It was a life that had started with suffering and that had, even in the better parts, always held a note of suffering. And for the first time, Peveril wondered why the man in front of him hadn't broken centuries ago. The answer was a bitter one. Muradin, Sal's father, had predicted it centuries ago. "You are not from this time. Even if you have been reborn here, you still should not exist here, because there are no circumstances that would have led to your existence," he had said. "So your body might be in stasis until you return to your rightful time. That means you would be able to grow in mind, but not in body until then." And the man had been right, and wrong as well. Peveril could see the truth in the broken man before him, a man who was now set in his way of life, and at the same time still struggling with himself. And it wasn't the obvious struggle with right and wrong that was problematic, but the true struggle of someone with centuries of experience and knowledge, forced to live with the chaotic, teenage brain of a barely 15-year-old. It didn't fit. A 15-year-old's brain was still nothing like an adult one's. Peveril knew he might have never studied it, but then he had been a teacher for a time, and had lived longer than anyone he knew except of Salazar. He had seen the difference in thinking between an adult and a 15-year-old. That means you would be able to grow in mind but not in body until then. How right Medin Emrys had been. How wrong he had been as well. The man in front of him had definitely grown in mind, but with the brain of a child, even after centuries of living, he was still affected by its structure. A cursed life, Peveril concluded bitterly. Cursed with the knowledge and experience of an old man while at the same time having the brain and body of a child. A child's desire but an adult's life since basically birth. The abilities of an adult but the unsteady magic of a child after its first maturity. Oh, Peveril had to give it to Salvasaha. The man in front of him knew exactly how to hide his disadvantages. Peveril guessed that Salvasaha had learned to suppress or circumvent his teenage brain and magic by sheer will and necessity. The man in front of him definitely had matured, at least in soul, but at the same time, unlike true children, the man had to fight his way into adulthood, simply because, unlike with other children, Salva's body and brain refused to age with his mind, a fact that, so Peveril gathered, had not fully been overcome by the man in front of him. Well, one step forward, 2 steps back, Peveril mused dryly, quite aware of the fact that Sal's opinions on the world had been set for centuries now, even if it had taken longer to set them than it would have taken if Sal was normal. But Peveril was also aware that the man's brain was not structured for such a set path, just yet, the only reason why there was still hope to rescue that broken man in front of him. Peveril's hands surrounded Salvazar's and closed them around the locket in his hands. "You haven't killed your brother," Peveril said. "It might seem like it for now, but the only thing you have given him in the end was the peace he never found in life. You might have acted wrongly in trying to do so. I won't be able to judge that. but, in the end there was no salvation for him except of the one you provided. Salvazar just shook his head and the flames surrounding them again started to lick at his features. Peveril knew that he had no time to make Salvazar believe his claims, so he let it be. Instead, he did the only thing he could do. He embraced the man in front of him while calling up his own heritage as a Forcibly-born. Powers, not used by him in centuries, flared and surrounded the body he held protectively in his arms. For a moment the magic of the other Forcibly-born fought his, while trying to stop him, but unlike Sal's magic which, even if the other man had honed it far longer than Peveril, was still that of a child after its first maturity, Peveril commanded the magic of an adult, and even with the finely honed skills Salvazar had perfected over the centuries, skills that would gain him advantages in battle and healing that no other man had, Salvazar's magic had no chance to win in a fight solely based on strength, because even with Salvazar's ability to use the tiniest bit of his magic to do feats that others thought impossible without powerful magic, his less mature magic lacked the strength of the magic of a mature Forcibly-born like Peveril. Salvazar's magic faltered under the onslaught of his friends, and Peveril could see his magic surrounding the other man's, reining it in and forcing it to compel to its wishes. The white flames vanished, and when Peveril looked down at the other man again, he could see betrayal in his eyes. Peveril smiled. "I'm sorry, Salvazar," he said while pronouncing the other one's name carefully. "But it isn't your time yet. You might hate me for it later on, rightfully so, but if you ever need me and I'm still around, come and find me. I betrayed you once. I won't do it again." And with that he fought the other one's magic into submission. If there had been an Obliviate spell, maybe Peveril would have used that instead, but since the spell wouldn't be around for another century or two, Peveril did something else. He returned into the still willingly open mind of the man in front of him and used the abilities given to him by birth. The storm of the Thunderbird found entrance into the other man's mind and surrounded every knowledge, every experience the man in front of him once held. Peveril forced himself to continue until the recognition and awareness of those green eyes in front of him dimmed and finally vanished. Peveril gritted his teeth at that. It hurt. It hurt to destroy the man he had held as dear as he had held Godric, his sister and his wife. "One step forward," he whispered to himself, while the grim in his blood took hold of the other man's now unguarded magic and used it to work his biding. "And 2 steps back." When Peveril finally was done, he held a baby in his hands, a true baby without any knowledge of its past or the future to come. Peveril knew that it wouldn't be forever. He knew that his magic was only able to provide a breather for the babe that was once a man, but it was the best he could do. You couldn't heal the broken mind of a Firbolg, but Peveril had an advantage towards most of the Firbolg. His magic, the magic of the Grim, had always been meant to interfere with life, adding to that the ability of the Phoenix to be reborn that Peveril had borrowed from his victim. And he guessed that there was at least a chance now to stop one of the men he held dear, a man he had hurt by trying to protect him, from fading until nothing was left but insanity. Now he just needed to find someone who had nothing to do with Salvazar's past, and who was willing to raise the child. Peveril knew that there was a high chance of Salvazar's memories being triggered if the man was surrounded by known faces. He took the locket that Sal's tiny hands still clung to even in sleep and looked at it contemplating. In the end he simply repaired it and then changed the pattern of the emeralds on it to resemble an S. He couldn't bear to throw something away that had caused all this suffering to the man that Peveril had known as headstrong and kind. "Maybe it will give you something to hold on," he decided. "Maybe it'll be a good luck charm for this new chance at life. And maybe Peveril would be able to find another family for the child in his arms, a family that would raise the boy to act differently than he did now." Peveril knew that his abilities would only be able to affect the other man's body and soul for the first 15 years of his life. Those years that the other man's body and brain had already matured once. It was the Grim in his blood and the duty of one of Death's servants that gave him the ability to rewind the life of the man who was now the baby in his hands. "Tell me, my lord, does his suffering please you so much that you force me to prolong it?" he asked the wind while clasping the locket around the child's neck. The answer was a laugh and a soft caress of his locks. Nay, Peveril, child, the wind whispered. But it's not his time yet. He can't be claimed by death until the circle is fulfilled. And Peveril closed his eyes and refused to answer. In front of his inner eye he saw his grandson James playing with the cloak of his father. He saw his estranged, unacknowledged grandson, who belonged to the Gaunt family, sitting in the Wizards' Council, waving his hand through the air, on his finger a ring with a black stone, with gold engraving. He saw the bloodshed of the wand that spread throughout the European countries. The artifacts that destroyed his brother were my grandfather's, and yet they came out of their encounter with him unaffected, while the one who stopped the doom that follows them lies broken in my arms, he said bitterly. I should have been there for him. I should have interfered with his brother and his greed for power. Grim, the wind said, and Peveril stiffened. His fate has long since been decided. Like Peveril's had been, long since before his birth. Like King Arthur Pendragon's had been. Like even Medrod's might have been. Peveril inclined his head. He needs a family, he finally said. Maybe. Oh yes, maybe that family would do the trick. No catch? The man on the door asked with a raised eyebrow. No catch, Peveril confirmed, shifting the child in his grasp. A 15-month-old child, no family left. Magical. That was what you were hoping for, wasn't it? The man on the door stiffened. Why would I need a child? I have 7 of my own, he said. Peveril smiled. But as far as I could find out, your best friend doesn't. Since he refused to adopt one of your own children, you started to look for an orphan. Believe me, the one who sent me was thorough in his investigation. The other man shifted. What do you want for the child? He finally asked coolly. Peveril just smiled. A good home, he said. As long as the child is well cared for, neither I nor the one who sent me will ask for anything else, except, and the man's eyes darkened at that. Except to be allowed to see the child again just before he reaches his 15th year of life. I want to explain to him why I choose to do what I did. This time there was clear surprise seen in the eyes of the other man, then his expression darkened again. So you want him to know that he's adopted, he said coolly, and Peveril smiled. He needs to know, he said. I hid his heritage for the time being, but the moment he turns 15, he will regain it. Blood adoption or not. The man blinked in surprise at that. A pure-blood child? He asked. Peveril hesitated. Yes, he finally confirmed, and the man leaned forward to get a better look at the child in front of him. Will he be able to use a wizard's magic? There should be no problem, Peveril answered. As an answer, the man took the child and cradled it to his chest. I think his parents won't object to your conditions, he said. Come on in. I will contact them. And with that, the door behind them closed again. Year 1398 AD. Even the best laid plans can go awry. And there had been a lot of plans. 15 years of freedom. 15 years to raise a child. 15 years to recover from guilt. 15 years for a being to learn a new way of life. But even the best laid plans could go awry, and whatever Peveril had planned, whatever the new parents and godparents of the child had planned, whatever would have been best for the child itself, in the end, it didn't happen. Oh, Peveril gave up the child in his arms to a young and desperate couple. The husband of the couple had been the heir to a very important and influential French magical family. He and his wife had been unable to have children, and in the end the husband's father had set an ultimatum. If they wouldn't have a child within the next 2 years, the marriage would be dissolved, something that the couple didn't want to happen because, unlike others, they had been happy enough to fall in love after marriage. So they begged a friend to help them, and that friend was the one to be contacted by Peveril. The child was adopted by the couple by blood adoption to ensure that it truly was theirs before they returned to their home in France. And since they officially had stayed at a cousin's in Britain for the last year, to escape the pressure of their parents and parents-in-law, they simply could claim it as their own child, born by the wife herself. The parents were happy. The grandparents were happy. The child had a family. And Peveril had vanished from their lives to return to where he came from. It should have been the end of their interactions for the next 15 years, but it wasn't. Excuse me, Is this the home of Salvatio Malfoy? The man at the door eyed the stranger warily. The stranger was a grown, emaciated man with pale skin, black hair, and bloodshot eyes. Who wants to know that? The man finally said. The man himself had red locks and unearthly green eyes in the color of the killing curse that would be invented soon. I am Anastasia Sanguini, the stranger said. I am a teacher at Hogwarts, the school that your son's going to. The other man just raised an eyebrow at that. He's not my son, he said. He's my nephew and godson. I'm truly surprised that there's a vampire teaching at Hogwarts. The answer was a grin full of fang. I know that it's not really common to see my species outside of a coven, but, well, you could say that I am different. The vampire said, Don't worry, I don't use the children as snacks or anything idiotic like that. The most rumors you've heard about vampires normally are vastly exaggerated. Are they now? The man said while his cool green eyes evaluated the being in front of him. In that moment, another voice from within the house could be heard. Nicholas? The female voice asked. Who's at the door? The man didn't even turn to answer. A teacher of your son's school, Catherine, he said. Did you know that Salvadio's school has vampires as teachers? The answer was a snort. Then a short female with light blonde hair and forest green eyes stepped next to the man. When she saw Anastasius, she smiled. I guess you are Professor Sanguini, she said. My son has been talking about your class for some time now. I think he adores you. The vampire sighed at that. I thought that as well, Madame Malfoy, he said. But, may I come in? What I have to talk to you about shouldn't be talked about at the front door. Catherine Malfoy inclined her head at that and then stepped back. The man Nicholas followed her lead and then gestured the vampire in. Together with their guest, they returned to the sitting room, and then with an invite to sit down towards the vampire, they sat as well. Inside the room already were two other people. A man with black hair and cool grey eyes, and a woman with the same blonde hair like Catherine's. My husband, Lord Henry Malfoy, and my sister Perenelle, Nick's wife, Catherine said before introducing the vampire to her husband and sister. He's Salvatio's professor at Hogwarts, she said. Professor Sanguini. The vampire bowed. Anastasius Sanguini at your service, he said, and then sat down. A moment later, one of the house elves brought some wine. May we ask why a teacher of my son has come to us while the school is in session? Lord Henry Malfoy asked coolly and sat up a little bit to fix the vampire with a stare. The vampire sighed. It's complicated, he said hesitatingly. May I first inquire if something happened at home before he returned to school? And while the other adults exchanged confused looks, Nicholas didn't dare to look up from his fingers. He was sure that the guilt was written in his face. Salvatio Amethyst Malfoy had always been a curious child. From the day his parents had laid eyes on him, he had always been different. While other children loved to listen to stories, Salvatio preferred textbooks. While other children started to get bored at political functions, Salvatio stayed and listened. While other children expressed a wish to play, Salvatio preferred to learn. The child had an inquisitive mind, and his parents and godparents soon learned that answering one question would just lead to another three to answer as well. They also learned that keeping their child away from knowledge would just make it more determined to unearth it. In the end, it was the father, Henry Malfoy, who gave in and started to teach the child politics, just to keep it away from other secrets that it shouldn't know yet. Henry, he's but a 5-year-old. Don't you think it's, a little too early to teach a 5-year-old how to circumvent laws or how to use them for his benefits? The godfather asked the father, concerned when he found out about the new training his godson received. The answer was a sigh. It's either that or watch how long he'll take to find out about his adoption, Henry answered, and rubbed his forehead warily. I love him, Nicholas. I love him as if he was my own son. He is, Henry. From birth, I mean. Henry corrected himself, and then turned to the door of his study to ensure that it was still closed, locked and spelled. Like I said, I love him, but he's far too young to understand the circumstances that lead to his identity. Do you truly think that I can tell a barely 5-year-old that his true parents died around his birth, and that his true uncle couldn't take him because of circumstances? I can't talk about blood adoption to a barely 5-year-old. So you're teaching him about politics? The godfather asked with a raised eyebrow, and Henry inclined his head. So I'm teaching him about politics, he said. That should occupy him for a while. It did for about 2 years. Then they were back to square one. Yes, Salvatio Amethyst Malfoy was a curious child. But how curious Nicholas wouldn't learn until the boy had been home from his second year in Hogwarts for about a month and a half. Nicholas himself was an inventor and alchemist. A lot of inventions in magic were made by him. A lot of discoveries in alchemy were made by him. A lot of new potions and spell were of his creation. That day, Nicholas's wife Perenelle had wanted to visit her parents. Catherine and Anari also decided to go. Nicholas instead had stayed behind to look after Salvatore, who was currently ill in bed. Don't worry, he said when his wife and his sister-in-law and her husband left. I will look after Salvatore. And no new potions until we're back, Nick, his wife returned. Who knows? You would even blow up the house if there isn't one of us near you to stop you. Nicholas had suppressed laughter at that. You know that I would never do that, love, he had answered, and then kissed her goodbye. See you later. Now, a few months later, Nicholas wished that he would have listened to his wife back then. He didn't, and he paid for it tenfold. So instead of doing something else, Nicholas had started a new potion in his lab that day. It was an experimental one, and as such, relatively unstable, but Nicholas was an experienced potions master and had done many great tasks with potions in alchemy. He even was in the process to create a true philosopher's stone. The potion Nicholas planned to create was something to reduce fever. He had done his calculations over the last 7 months and had looked up everything he could find about the ingredients he decided to use. The potion formula he invented was sound, as far as Nicholas could tell, so he saw no reason to not brew the new potion right now. Before he started, he had gone to his nephew's room. The child had been ill with fever for the last 4 days, and whatever Catherine and Perenelle did, they both were experienced as healers. It didn't help. The child still burned as if it was fighting something constantly. It wasn't the first time Salvatore had suffered under a fever like that. Since the child had turned 9, it had bouts of fever at least once a year, and no one could tell what was wrong with the child. In the end, Nicholas had started to invent the potion he wanted to start brewing that day. Salvatore, he whispered into the darkened room, and the child's tired eyes snapped up to look at him. Uncle, Nick, it asked. I'm going to try the potion idea that I've been working on, Nicholas said. He hadn't told the child that the potion was for it. If he had done something wrong, at least the child wouldn't feel low because of it. If you need me, I'm in the lab. All right, the child mumbled as an answer and then closed its eyes again. Nicholas stepped next to the bed to measure the child's fever. The child leaned into his touch, desperate for the chill of Nicholas's hand. The fever was still far too high. Not good. Not good at all. Nicholas just hoped that his potion would cure it. So in the end he tucked in the child and then kissed it on the forehead before he left, closing the door behind him softly. Back in his lab, Nicholas started on his newly invented potion. The formula was easy and quite straightforward. The calculations Nicholas had done all showed a low probability for accidents. So when Nicholas added the next ingredient, a biting carrot, he expected nothing to happen. The potion was stable. The calculations sound and the ingredients shouldn't react too badly with each other. He was sure that he knew exactly how the ingredients would react together and it should not have been dangerous. However, he was wrong. Instead of a slightly bubbling potion, the cauldron suddenly exploded, throwing him in the wall behind him, burning and poisoning him. Nicholas wanted to scream in agony, but had no air to do so. His lungs burned. His legs were in an odd ankle and he couldn't even move his hands. His mind was fuzzy, and even blinking didn't reduce the slow blackening of his vision, and while he was lying there on the ground, he suddenly knew that this time there would be no one who would come to his rescue. Catherine and Hannery and Perenelle had already left. The only ones at home were Nicholas himself and Salvatio, who was sleeping off his fever. He was all by himself. He would die today, and as if he had called them, suddenly memories of his life invaded his fading consciousness. It was said that at the end you would see your life flashing by in front of your eyes, and Nicholas did. It was shambled and not in the proper order, but he saw his life nonetheless. And it started with the first time he had ever seen his nephew. The child, what happened to its parents? He had asked the stranger who was still cradling the baby. They died, the man answered instantly. And I'm unable to care for him. I'm far too old to run after a young boy like him. Nicholas guessed that the man meant it. The man's hair was white and his eyes were oddly milky, showing an eye illness old people often had. Is there truly no one else to claim the child? Nicholas asked nervously. He didn't want to get up his friend's hopes just to find out that there was someone else still. The parents are dead. The uncle can't care for him. The grandparents are too old. It was a mutual decision. You don't have to fear about losing him again. And Nicholas had called his sister-in-law and her husband his friend. The first time Catherine got to hold her son was the first time Nicholas saw her smile in 5 years. What's his name? She asked the stranger. The man just smiled. We called him Sal, he said. But whatever you chose will be fine. He's young enough not to mind a change in name. We should leave Sal nevertheless, Catherine replied. I think it wouldn't be right for him to lose the last connection he still has with his birth parents. In the end they decided on Salvatio. Salvatio, Amethyst Malfoy, Catherine said. And neither Nicholas nor Henri had the heart to tell her that the child might later on hate to be named after a stone. That had been nearly 13 years ago. 13 years of laughter, and now Nicholas would bring new tragedy to the family by dying. That was the moment the door to Nicholas' lab flew open, and Salvatio entered stumbling. For a moment the child stopped, its eyes widened, then panic crossed its face, and it stumbled towards him, clearly unsteady on its feet. Uncle Nick! Salvatio cried, speeding up to reach the lethal injured man that was his uncle and godfather. Uncle Nick! Salvatio reached him and fell next to him on his knees. Nicholas could see the horror on the child's face and tried instantly to distract the young boy from his beaten, gruesome-looking body. It will be all right, Salvatio. He pressed out. Don't worry too much. Dark spots started to dance in front of his eyes, but those desperate and fearful green eyes in front of him made him fight the darkness. Instead, another memory crept in his mind. Salvatio had been 7 when they finally had told him that he was adopted. The child hadn't taken it well and had run away. It had been Nicholas who found it. Salvatio, he said, while leaning onto the tree his nephew had vanished into. Don't you think that running away might be the wrong reaction? The answer was a tear-filled scoff. Don't care, the child said. It's not as if I'm wanted. Nicholas raised an eyebrow at that. How did you come to that absurd conclusion? He asked. The answer was a little shock. Because if they truly would have wanted me, they wouldn't have brought it up, the child answered, sobbing. Until now they never talked about it with me. I thought that meant that they saw me as theirs. Nicholas sighed at that. Obviously we weren't able to even keep this secret from you, he said, and then he shook his head. Your parents would have never told you if it weren't for your heritage. At that, Salvatio had looked up. What do you mean? And Nicholas sighed and started to explain about the condition that had come with the child. They didn't want to wait to tell you until you had to find out because they feared you would feel betrayed. At the same time, they wanted you to be old enough to understand their arguments when they told you. It is obvious now that we should have talked to you years ago. Uncle Nick, and Nicholas returned to the lethal situation he was in. He tried to smile at the panicking boy, but instead felt darkness creeping near. Not your fault, he rasped. Say, Tante Perenelle, I love. He lost consciousness. The last thing he saw were his nephew's eyes, lighting up in unearthly green fire. Not you too. I won't lose you too. Then the darkness found him. Papa! Papa! Look, I've got a letter from a school in Britain. May I see it, mon fils? And Nicholas stepped next to Henri to look at the letter as well. Nicholas, Henry said, but the other man had already taken the open letter to read it over again. It's from Hogwarts, the British School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Nicholas said. It's inviting Salvatio to join. Henry looked at him confused. But why? He asked. Salvatio is living in France. I guess he was born in Britain, Nicholas said. My parents had to go to Beauxbatons themselves to enroll me there. I didn't get a letter since I wasn't born in France. If Papa finds out, then you tell him that Catherine and you were still in Britain when Salvatio was born. You were visiting your cousin at that time after all, and you came home with the child after staying at our home for about 2 weeks, far longer than you planned. It's easy to pretend that you were still in Britain back then, that is, if you want your child to go to Scotland for its education. Nicholas replied, Salvatio knows that he's adopted. Maybe he wants to at least feel a little close to the parents he lost before he could remember them. Beauxbatons' yearly Yule Ball was as dull as every year, at least until 16-year-old Nicholas laid eyes on a girl he had never acknowledged before. She was wearing a yellow summer dress with red flowers on it. Her pale blonde hair had also red flowers woven in it, and her forest green eyes were twinkling like the stars. Mademoiselle Delacourt, he said. What a stunning dress you are wearing today. She laughed at that. Stunning enough to root you on the floor, Monsieur Flamel? She asked at that, her eyes twinkling even more. Or are you still able to ask me for a dance? Ah, Lord Malfoy, it's nice to see you again. Have you thought about my petition for the Major Migate? With your vote, we would surely win. A legislation to register pure blood-born is not exactly what I want to support, Lord. You should think about it, Lord Malfoy. After all, who knows what repercussions could come out of it if you decide to not vote for Père? And Henri Malfoy had turned to look at his innocent-looking 6-year-old son. Not now, Salvatore, he said softly. The boy just looked at him confused for a moment, then turned to the other lord. Milord, he said, are you talking about the bribes that you pay the head of the Aurors to keep your head out of prison when you talk about repercussions? And when the other lord paled, the innocent-looking child continued. Or is it about the illegal gambling you join every Thursday night? And Nicholas stood in the back and suppressed laughter at that. The boy was 6, a 6-year-old devil. How by Merlin and Morgana had that little devil sniffed out that information? Never mind, Lord Malfoy, the Lord finally said. I guess I will have to do without your help. And Nicholas burst out laughing, just silenced by the quick spell of his wife aimed at him. You know, when you ever touch me again, I will. 18-year-old Nicholas Flamel tried in vain to not listen to his wife. Currently she had started on all the curses she would bestow upon him if he ever dared to enter her bed again. Don't worry, one of the 2 midwives whispered. She'll calm down later. It's often like that in birth. Good to know, Nicholas answered, and then swallowed when his wife found a new idea to get her revenge on him. He wondered if his hand would survive that night. Bonjour, Lafayette, the best wand-maker in Paris, said when they entered. Madame and Monsieur Malfoy, how may I help you today? We're here to get a wand for our son, Monsieur Lafayette, Henri answered, pushing 9-year-old Salvatore softly to the counter. The wand-maker looked at the boy. He does not look like he's 11, Lafayette finally said. He isn't, Henry answered while letting Nicholas and Peronelle enter. He is 9. So why are you coming to me now? Lafayette asked, surprised. There's still time. Normally there would be, Nicholas answered, but Salvatio does know too much about magic, and we cannot continue his study without a wand. Lafayette raised an eyebrow. Normally parents do not teach their children a lot of magic until they reach the 11th year of their life, he said, scrutinizing Nicholas and the others. He's a genius, Henry answered, sighing. He learned to read when he was barely 3, and I fear he does now know my library better than me. So he just read things? No, he followed us around and asked question after question until we started to teach him what we know. Catherine answered. You are not telling us we should have stomped our son's thirst of knowledge? No. This time the wand-maker was studying the boy in front of the counter. Salvatio just stared back. How do you choose which wand does fit which wizard? Do you just let them swing the wands, or do you test their bloods for their affinity? Nicholas could see the surprise in the eyes of the wand maker when Salvatio asked his questions. Nicholas himself just shook his head. He had long ago given up on trying to understand how the youth came up with his questions. "I use their blood," the wand maker finally answered, looking curious. "You're definitely not a normal young man, are you, young Malfoy?" The boy just shrugged. "I like to know things," he answered. "Well then, would you give me some drops of your blood to test it?" the wand maker asked. "How many?" the boy answered, looking at the wand maker with hooded eyes. "Just 2, there is nothing else I can do with them except of testing your affinity," the wand maker answered, smiling at the boy. Salvatio scrutinized him for a moment, then he nodded and extended his hand. "You can have them?" he said, but he watched the wand maker the whole time after he had spent the 2 drops. Nicholas found it amusing. "You should not have told him about blood magic and the dark arts, Nicholas." Perenelle scolded him quietly while watching Salvatio being measured. "He asked, and I saw no reason not to tell him." Nicholas defended himself. "Well, the reason should be obvious," Henry said, chuckling. "And I wondered why Salvatio was looking at the wand maker as if he was the new Dark Lord." Nicholas shrugged. "Maybe I should have waited a few years," he answered, "but I saw no reason to at the time," Salvatio asked. "I did not think that he would make an enemy out of the wand maker when he asks for his blood." In the end, they ended up with a new wand for the child and a warning. "Holy is an unusual wood for a wand," the wand maker said, "but combined with the pureness of unicorn blood and the darkness of grim hair, something like that implies a greatness and a pureness of the soul I have not seen before. Watch out for him. He will change our world more than once until he dies. You could adopt one of our children. Neither Perenelle nor I would mind if you—" "No, Nicholas. Both Catherine and I know how much you love your 7 children. We won't take one of them from you just because we can't have an own." "You wouldn't take it. Perenelle and I would still see it every day. It would just have 4 parents instead of 2. "No, Nicholas. No, please. We simply can't." "Then at least give me the right to search for a child you can take in without feeling guilty." "All right, that I can accept." Salvatio Amethyst Malfoy was a curious child. He had always been inquisitive and had absorbed knowledge like a sponge from the moment he was given to his parents. Nothing had been safe from him. If there was a secret, he found it. If there was trouble, he landed in the middle of it and pulled himself out again before his parents could even think about helping him. Yes, Salvatore Amethyst Malfoy was a curious child, but whatever he had learned, how different he was, nothing could prepare him for the day he found his uncle dying in his lab. Salvatio had been feeling ill that day. It was the fever he had had ever for at least once a year since his 9th birthday. This time, his parents and Aunt Perenelle hadn't been able to stay at home, so in the end, only Uncle Nicholas had stayed to watch over him. It didn't truly matter to Salvatio. He had slept anyway, so he didn't mind his parents leaving too much. At least he didn't until he heard the explosion in the lab and came there to make sure that his uncle was all right. He wasn't, and it had torn Salvatio's heart when he had seen the extent of his uncle's injuries and had heard his uncle's words, trying to relieve him from a guilt that hadn't settled yet on Salvatio's narrow shoulders. "Uncle Nick," Salvatio pleaded. "Uncle Nick, Uncle Nick." But the man's eyes had been unfocused and his breathing labored. Something in Salvatio told him that his uncle wouldn't survive those injuries. Something in Salvatio told him that he had to act to save the man in front of him. But whatever told him these facts, whatever called to him, he couldn't grasp it. It was as if it was removed from his reach by an unbreakable wall. A wall Salvatio couldn't breach. A wall Salvatio didn't want to even try to breach because he instinctively knew that behind that wall, nothing but pain was hidden. Then his uncle's eyes unfocused even more. For a moment they shut, and Salvatio's hands grabbed at the shirt of his uncle as if he could hold him, as if he could rescue him if he just held on strong enough on the bloody fabric. Then Uncle Nicholas smiled. "Uncle Nick," Salvatio repeated his pleading. And Nicholas returned to the lethal situation he was in. Again his uncle's lips twitched as if he wanted to smile reassuringly. "Not your fault," his uncle rasped. Say, Tante Perenelle, I love it. His uncle's eyes closed, and suddenly Salvatio was totally aware of the blood that not only drenched his godfather's and his own clothing, but that also had started to tint the floor red. A red puddle slowly but surely spread over the stone floor, mixing with the greens and browns of the exploded potion and surrounding the bits and pieces of metal from the destroyed cauldron. Please, no, no, no. Salvatore wumbled, his hands over his godfather's body, unable to touch him in fear of hurting him, but also unable to stay still and do nothing while something in his mind told him that Salvatore should be able to help. Somehow. But there was no way. And there was no one he could call. Yes, his parents were noble. Yes, they had servants and even 2 house elves. But the servants were home, and the house elves had gone with their masters, and would be unable to hear the call from that far away. Salvatore was alone, and his godfather's blood was slowly soaking his garments. It was when he saw his godfather's eyes flickering once, before the figure in front of him seemed to lose even the tiny rest of its life, that suddenly another, foreign part of him rose and filled him, still imprisoned behind impenetrable walls. But there nonetheless, his eyes lightened up in unearthly green fire. Not you, too. I won't lose you, too, he hissed, his fists tightening until his nails drew his own blood. Salvatore couldn't tell who he had lost, but he knew as sure as he knew his name that he had lost someone, and he wouldn't lose Nick. One of Salvatore's bloodied fists loosened and reached up to his neck where a locket lay, a locket he had worn since the day he had been brought to his family. His fist closed around that piece of jewelry as if to pray to it. Then he ripped it from his neck, throwing it away from him, and watched it meet the opposite wall where it fell to the ground. Salvatore hadn't thought about that gesture. He had simply done it, not caring that the chain had left his neck bloodied or that the locket had opened when it met the wall. Instead, he turned back to his uncle, his hands again hovering over the man while he prayed. He prayed to whoever would listen that somehow his godfather wouldn't die. "You can't die, Uncle Nick. Not you, too," he whispered. Then his hands finally stopped hovering, and instead ripped open his uncle's shirt so that he could see the damage. Salvatore knew instantly that even his mother or Tante Perenelle would be unable to save his godfather from dying. Salvatore had watched both ladies often enough, when they induced into the healing arts, to know that even their knowledge wouldn't be enough to save the dying man in front of him. And yet, there was something in Salvatore that told him that his godfather could be saved, if Salvatore just would listen. But Salvatore was a 12-year-old child. Whatever he knew, he didn't know enough. By Morgana, no one Salvatore knew would know enough to rescue the man in front of him. "You know, you could help him if you truly tried, Salvatore," a voice suddenly said, and Salvatore turned wide-eyed towards the speaker. No one was there, just a shadow at the wall, flickering in the light of the still burning fire. Salvatore turned back towards his godfather, his hands again hovering, this time over the wounds. "If you swear yourself to me like your ancestors did, I would even help you," the voice said again, and again Salvatore's head snapped towards the place where he had heard the voice from. There was nothing but the slightly moving door. "If you truly want it, you are now strong enough to circumvent the barrier. It has lost a lot of its strength already." This time Salvatore thought that he even might have seen something, but when he focused on the place, there was still nothing there. "It's your decision." Before Salvatore could even think about looking at the place where the voice had come from this time around, his uncle's breathing stopped. "No, no, no, no," Salvatore cried. "No." And in an automatic gesture he reached for his uncle's forehead, his fingers dancing, drawing runes in a known and yet so foreign pattern. Then he drew runes on his own forehead, before carving both of them into the flesh and activating them. It all happened within seconds. The magic of the activation coursed through his body, and for a moment Salvatore's sight blackened. Then it returned in full color, somehow feeling more intense than any other time before. And his uncle drew a rattling breath. "You won't die on me, uncle." The words were harsh, and the barrier in Salvatore's mind wavered. But something was wrong. Something was different. Salvatore's magic didn't flow like it ever did before. Something had changed. Something necessary had changed. Blood magic, Salvatore whispered to himself. I haven't done my blood magic. And yet that creature behind the barrier knew that there was no way to stop the ritual now, if they died doing it or not. The moment the runes were activated, Salvatore had thrown his life on the line. But it didn't matter, somehow it didn't matter that he had done so. You have a choice. Remember and rescue his life and yours, or live forever in regret, the voice whispered again. But this time Salvatore wasn't sure if the voice hadn't come from within him, hadn't been a part of him. And suddenly Salvatore knew that whatever he had to remember, whatever pain was hidden away, pounding against the barrier in his mind, he had to remember, because he would never forgive himself if he could have rescued his godfather and hadn't done it because he had been afraid of a little bit of pain. And with that thought, with that decision, the walls in his mind shattered, giving access to the memories lost behind. So, I will stay 15 forever? Salvatore heard himself ask a man he knew as father. I am not sure, his father answered. But I have made up a theory. A theory? You are not from this time. Even if you have been reborn here, you still should not exist here because there are no circumstances that would have led to your existence. His father elaborated, so your body might be in stasis until you return to your rightful time. That means you would be able to grow in mind, but not in body until then. But what is with dying? My theory suspects that you won't be able to die until you are back in your own time. You are timeless until you reach the day you left your own time. After that you should age normally. So, I will be 15 for the next 1,000 or 2,000 years. He was stricken with horror when I told him. Salvatore's memory self told a knight, Sir Lancelot his mind supplied. He wanted to see my arm thrice before he was sure that the basilisk venom had not killed me. The story was true? The knight asked, half horrified, half awed. It bit me, Salvatore had said casually. It was a phoenix that healed me. I am surprised that your father did not insist that you would never leave his side again, the knight said. How many winters did you count when this happened? 2, 3. As big as the scar is, you must have been no more than a toddler, a memory of his 12-year-old self slaying the basilisk. I taught you healing for 10 years, and now you don't want to finalize the last step in your profession? Morgana had said, a healer cannot fight, Salvatore heard himself answer. And you want to fight? No, I want to protect. The time I grew up in, it was normal to do blood magic. Rituals and potions were the most often used arts of magic. For us, blood magic wasn't evil, it just was a way to gain control over your gift. Salvatore heard himself tell one of his best friends. Godric had been his name. But it's seen as evil now, so why didn't you stop? Said man, objected. Because I can't, Salvatore had answered sincerely. What do you mean you can't? Blood magic can be deadly if you... Then Salvatore had changed his explanation. There are rituals and rituals, Godric. The first rituals a druid does are those to shield their body from the following rituals. After that comes the blood awakening. If you wouldn't do the blood awakening, you could stop after shielding yourself from other rituals. But after the blood awakening, you have to keep doing blood magic. If you wouldn't, you would lose the grip on your magic and finally on your mind. It wouldn't do you any good if you stopped. Oh, Godric had said, his eyes wide. So you have to do it. You would go crazy if you didn't, right? Yes. But there is always a setback in every kind of magic you practice. Huh? But I didn't. Why should I call you a monster? Salvatore heard Godric's confused voice, and he could feel a taste of his hurt and furious feelings of that time. I don't know, Salvatore had answered. All I know is that you did. You called me a monster to my face. You called my father, my grandparents, and my son a monster to my face. And you ask me why I would be furious with you? I would never... This whole discussion was about purebloods and pure-blooded children in Hogwarts. That discussion wasn't about you or your family. Well, newsflash, Godric, I am a pure blood. My father was a pure blood. My grandparents were. My son is. I might be a mixed-born pure blood, but a pure blood nonetheless. I never thought you would think of me as a creature unable to behave human. Mother was weak. She never understood that some things have to be done to come closer to our Fabelg inheritance. This ritual is one of them. After all, our ancestors are immortal, so that just tells us we should be immortal too. Midraud, his beloved baby brother, had said, and Salvicha's response had been harsh at that time. Don't try to reason with me, brother. I am a healer. I would not understand what you are talking about. You were always more like mother, his brother had answered unconcerned. No, you are like my father, too blinded by your need to look out for others to understand an opportunity like that. I think this time I am proud that you think I am like Arthur. I wouldn't even want to be like you. I'm sorry, Salvazar. Salvazar heard Peverell say in his memory, but it isn't your time yet. You might hate me for it later on, rightfully so, but if you ever need me and I'm still around, come and find me. I betrayed you once. I won't do it again. And then words came to him that he hadn't heard back then, but that he remembered now. Tell me, my lord, does his suffering please you so much that you force me to prolong it? Peverell had asked in a desperate tone of voice. The answer was a laugh. Nay, Peverell, child, the wind had whispered, but it's not his time yet. He can't be claimed by death until the circle is fulfilled. It was the same voice that had spoken to Salvatio just moments ago. It's your decision, child, the voice said in that moment. You know my price. If you will serve me like your ancestors served me, I will help you to rescue your godfather. And Salvazar looked up at the shadowy figure that was hardly seen in the light of the fire. Then his eyes traveled back to the man in front of him, a man that was just still alive because of the magic that bound him to Salvazar. It was an unstable connection, a risky one. Salvazar could feel the connection's instability, like he could feel the instability of his own mind. Still, he had to do it. He had to try. With experienced hands, he started to paint the ritual circle on the floor. Then he placed the nearly dead man in the middle and activated the runes. Again, Salvazar's magic stuttered before it stabilized. Its instability, together with his still suffering mind, was drawing on his sanity and the clarity of his thoughts. Salvazar shook his head and focused. He picked up one of the knives that Nicholas normally used for potion ingredients, made sure that it was safe to use, and then cut open the other man's body to reach the organs. For a moment, dizziness overcame him and his mind slipped. Not good, he needed to focus. But it was hard, so hard without the stability of his own magic. It was odd. The moment he remembered, the moment his magic turned wonky. But then Salvazar had been ill at least once a year with fever since his 9th birthday. A clear sign of his slowly unhinging blood magic. If he had woken like planned by Peverell, the other man would have been able to guide Salvazar through the wakening, and like that he might have been able to stabilize Salvazar until he had renewed his blood magic. Like it was now, Salvazar had just himself to rely on, and a patient he had to heal, or he would forever regret it. So he focused on the task with all his might. But it was hard, and after a time it slowly but surely started to impossible. When Salvazar had not even finished the healing of the organs of the other man, his hand nearly slipped when his mind suddenly drifted away into nothingness for a moment. You know that you won't be able to save him like that, the voice whispered again, while Salvazar tried with all his might to return his focus on the task, to clear his thoughts and his mind, and concentrate again. He couldn't. The fog that had started to invade his mind had strengthened, and he couldn't even see his work anymore, nevertheless think about the next step. No, 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 please not now, he whispered, knowing without a doubt that he had to save the man, but also knowing that he wouldn't be able to do it. Just one word, Salvazar, the voice said, and its sound mixed with memories of other sounds. Colors started to dance in Salvazar's vision. Memories blurred, past and present slowly but surely melted together, and Salvazar knew without a doubt that if he didn't get a grip of his mind right now, he would lose himself to insanity. It was like back then, 13 years ago, when Peverell had rescued him, and at the same time it was nothing like it at all. While back then it had been a deliberate step towards insanity and the all-consuming nothingness of the afterlife. This time it wasn't wanted but fought, and Salvazar was losing said fight. But he couldn't lose another person he loved. He couldn't lose the man who had taken the place of an uncle, of a godfather, of someone trusted and loved in his life. "Please, I'll do everything," he pleaded. "Please, just don't die on me." And like a sledgehammer, something rammed into his soul, anchoring it to life and sanity. It felt like downing. It felt like being stabbed all over again. Burning pain filled his body and his mind screamed when it was flooded with the same white flames that Salazar had called to end his life just 13 years ago. Salazar gasped and closed his eyes for a moment when his vision finally cleared and returned to normal. Then tears leaked out of his eyes, dropping onto the wounds of his uncle, healing them slowly and surely like only phoenix tears could. Salazar's hands also worked with renewed strength until the last grave wound was healed, and the man in front of him was as good as new. Only when Salazar was sure that his patient would live, he raised his face to the ceiling and spoke. "Why did you even ask?" he said. "As far as I know, I belong to you already from birth. Why did you even ask for my promise when you already had me in your clutches?" "Because without your answer today, you wouldn't have belonged to me from birth," the voice answered. "So you already knew my answer. You already knew that I would lose my last safe haven today, my last chance of peace in the eternal arms of death." "Don't worry," the voice answered softly. "You don't belong to me fully, yet, and you won't remember your promise until it is time." And with that, wind caressed Salazar's hair, and to the crying child, the once dying man woke up to new life. The next Nicholas could remember was agony. All-filling agony, coursing through his body, binding his soul and fogging his mind. And then it was gone, and peace filled him. Nicholas opened his eyes again, seeing his nephew sitting beside him weeping. "Salvatio," he said softly, and the boy looked down from the ceiling, his eyes focusing on his uncle, tears still in his eyes. "You stopped breathing for a moment," the boy said, flustered. "I thought I lost you." Nicholas blinked at that and then sat up. His body still ached, but the all-consuming pain was gone. Carefully he touched his chest and legs, sure that his ribs had been broken as well as his bones in his legs. Nothing. No open chest, no broken ribs or bones, not even blood, except of the blood which still marred his formerly white tunic. I thought I could not rescue," the boy next to him cried and flung himself in Nicholas' unsteady arms. I fought, but it was too much, way too much blood, and I didn't remember. The boy hiccuped, clutching Nicholas's tunic like a lifeline. "Shoo," Nicholas said, still feeling slightly ill. "Shoo, it's all right, child, it's all right." And just then he finally was able to comprehend the boy's words. "I thought I could not rescue you. Way too much blood." "You healed me?" Nicholas asked, astonished, looking down at the boy in his arms. He knew his wounds had been lethal, and not even Catherine, with all her knowledge, would have been able to save him this time. "Yes," the boy stuttered, still weeping. "I had to. You were dying, Uncle Nick." "I know I was," Nicholas answered, while trying to wrap his head around the fact that his 13-year-old nephew had healed him. "How?" he finally asked, and the boy pointed at ground around him. Written with white crayon there were runes, hundreds of runes. Nicholas shuddered. "Dark magic?" he asked, not sure if he should really be angry at his nephew. "You used dark magic to rescue me?" The boy, his head still buried in Nicholas' breast, shook it fiercely. "No," he cried. "No, but it was a ritual," Nicholas stated, while starting to feel better and better, as if each tear which fell on him took away the pain. "Yes," the boy whispered. "A ritual to bring back the death?" Nicholas asked carefully but fearfully. "No," the boy shook his head again. "A ritual to heal." But it did not help much. "You were still dying." New tears fell on Nicholas. A ritual to heal? Nicholas never ever had heard about something like that before. Where had the boy learned it from? "I was still dying," he finally asked. The head, still buried in his chest, nodded. Nicholas decided to let the ritual go until the boy was less upset. "So how did you rescue me?" he asked instead. A tear-strained face looked up to him, the eyes puffy and red. I don't know. I cried and you healed," the boy answered. And now I can't stop crying." Nicholas blinked at these words but wiped away the tears still rolling down the boy's cheeks. He wanted to ask how crying should have healed him, but in that moment he found the answer himself. The boy's tears soaked in his skin, and a faint glow emitted where they had been. Nicholas felt his fingers getting more agile, healthier. He stared at the boy who clung to him and back at his fingers, a sudden suspicion filling his mind. Again he wiped away the boy's tears, this time holding his hands so that the dim light of the fire could enlighten them. They glowed in the colors of the rainbow, twinkled like little stars. Nicholas was a potion master. He knew this glimmering phoenix, tears. And then he remembered the stranger's answer to his question from way back then. A pure blood child? Nicholas had asked, and the stranger had hesitated a moment before answering, yes. A child with phoenix tears. And suddenly Nicholas etched for answers he couldn't get from the child. "I don't think that something has happened to Salvatio over the holidays," Catherine said in that moment. Yes, he was a little bit different in the last part of the summer, a little bit more withdrawn and cautious maybe, but I don't remember an event that happened that could have changed him. I simply thought that he was growing up. "Something has changed within your son over the summer," the vampire professor replied to that. "Whatever happened, he isn't the same anymore." "What do you mean, Professor?" Nicholas asked, and the professor hesitated. "He treats me different," the professor finally settled on. "You mean Salvatio suddenly shows prejudice towards you?" Henry Malfoy asked, frowning, but the vampire professor shook his head. No prejudice, just different." He seemed uncomfortable with his answer. Nicholas was quite sure that the vampire could elaborate further, but didn't want to for whatever reason. "I was just concerned that something might have happened that could have affected him," the vampire finally settled on. "If there truly was no event, then I guess he truly is just growing up, and he will grow out of his current behavior quite soon. If he's doing something wrong, we can talk to," Catherine started to say. But the vampire interrupted her with a soft smile. "That isn't necessary, for now, I think," he said. "Give him some time to grow up. I promise that I will talk to you if the changes are intolerable. I just came to make sure that nothing else happened." In the end, the vampire left again, leaving an uncomfortable Nicholas alone with 3 other baffled persons. And for a moment, just for a moment, Nicholas actually thought about telling the others what happened. Then he remembered his own promise to himself that he wouldn't say a word until he knew the full story, and that story he had yet to unravel. Meanwhile, a vampire walked away from a manor with a gleam in his eyes. "I guess that there is someone else to visit tonight," Anastasia Sanguini murmured. "And I hope for Peveril's sake that he has a very good explanation for hiding my own father from his family for nearly 13 years. Pause. Now in the future timeline, Cornelius Fudge was seething. "What do you mean that if I ever dare to threaten Xenophilius Lovegood again, I will get sued?" he cried. The man in front of him just looked at him unruffled. "Exactly what I said," he answered the red-faced minister. "My clients don't like that you tried to interfere with a private business. If you ever dare to do so again, we will go to court, and believe me, minister, it won't end favorable for you." Cornelius hissed wordlessly at that. "I have every right to stop a liar from spreading his lies throughout the population," he finally spluttered. "And if the quibbler doesn't give up Oliver Twist, I will make sure that that rag is shut down. Like I said before, minister, if you ever dare to come near Xenophilius Lovegood again, if you ever dare to threaten him again, it will be the last thing you will ever do." Megis Adam Selwyn, lawyer of Morgannat, said coolly. "Have a good day, minister." And with that the lawyer turned and left, leaving seething Fudge. The minister gripped the magazine in his hands tighter, crumpling it slightly. "We will see how long you will stand behind that Oliver Twist when I officially proclaim him a liar and disturber of peace," he whispered. Of course, he couldn't use the Daily Prophet to do so anymore, since that newspaper was now also printing Twist's article. But there were always other ways. "You will regret ever writing a single line, Twist," Fudge said, and with that he threw the magazine across the room. It landed open, showing of the article that Fudge despised more than anything else in the moment. The Ministry's gamble. "Sirius Black is innocent," With that unbelievable statement, the Wizengamot meeting ended yesterday. Truly? Innocent? I know, I pointed out the probability of that months ago. But to find out that Sirius Black, famed mass murderer, betrayer of the Potters, and right-hand man of the Dark Lord Tom Riddle, never had a trial still blows my mind. Of course, you'll now say, but you've already talked about Lord Black. My answer to that will be simple. Of course I have talked about said man before, but back then it was mere speculation, contrary to now, when said speculations were finally confirmed. What hasn't been confirmed so far instead was the reason why it happened in the first place. Fact is, everyone, Death Eater and Imperious Victim, back then got a trial, except that is, Lord Sirius Black. Fact is, as well, that Sirius Black was hailed as the right-hand man of Tom Riddle, the Dark Lord, betrayer to the Potters, and mass murderer. One should think that at least two of those titles would have put Black on the top of the list of those who will get a trial, best by shoving Veritaserum down his throat before bringing him into court, just to ensure the truth, of course. Instead, he was quietly chucked away into Azkaban. Now, forget for a moment that the Lord Black was innocent. Imagine that he wasn't. Do you know the consequences? The consequences would have been a man in Azkaban who would have known exactly what Riddle was working on, who worked for him, marked and unmarked followers, who was imperieused, who was imprisoned somewhere or killed, who was still on the hit list of his Death Eaters, etc. If Sirius Black truly had been the right-hand man like he was hailed back then, shouldn't we accuse the Ministry of not doing their duty? They had, as they thought back then, a truly valuable prisoner in their care, and they did nothing. The Longbottoms were attacked 2 days after Black's imprisonment. Do you truly think that if Black would have been the right-hand man of Voldemort, he wouldn't have known of the plan to attack this family? The Bones died 4 days after, the McKinnons 6. All deaths that could have been averted if the Ministry truly would have believed their claim of Black's allegiance. And yet he was never questioned, as if the Ministry never cared about its own subjects back then. Of course, you might say, but that was back then. We've got another minister now, and I will have to answer you. Yes, we do, but does that make him any better than the last? Fact is, this minister tried as well to discredit an innocent Lord Potter, our savior, by accusing him of staged charges. Fact is well that he dismisses the death of a young boy, Cedric Diggory, as unimportant even if the murderer was never caught. Better yet, the minister refuses to even ask the only witness of Cedric Diggory's death for a statement. Instead, he is trying to discredit young lords and innocent journalists. And do you know the consequences of that? The consequence is that there's a murder on the loose in the wizarding world, and yet there is no one even looking into it. Just on Halloween, Azkaban prison was broken into, and known Death Eaters vanished. The Minster's first reaction to that? Accusing Black, a man who was then proven innocent, so the minister simply went on to his next target, accusing the man who incriminated Black, Peter Pettigrew. And yet, even after finding out through the evidence that Lord Black provided, the minister is still unwilling to even listen to our very own savior, Lord Potter, who told him that Pettigrew was the one killing Cedric Diggory back then in summer. Isn't it finally time to get together the evidence for the murder of an innocent 17-year-old? Isn't it time to listen to the only survivor of what might have been an ordeal? Or do you want to live with an unknown mass murderer on the loose? The Ministry has locked away a man they thought to be the right-hand man of a Dark Lord without a trial once. Are they willing to disregard what knowledge they can gain through Lord Potter's memories about that new threat, simply because one man is afraid that Lord Potter might have evidence that he doesn't want to be true? Think about the Bones, the Longbottoms, and the McKinnons. They all might have lived if the Ministry would have truly believed their claim of Lord Black being the right-hand man of Tom Riddle and using the knowledge he supposedly had. If they just had questioned the man, maybe then Pettigrew could have been found early, and maybe then the true right-hand man of Tom Riddle would have given away the knowledge of those attacks before they happened. We're now in a similar situation like back then. Lord Potter knows the killer. Lord Potter has seen him, and yet the Ministry refuses to even view his memories. What if the murderer will murder again? Will you just watch on? Will you just wait until you are the one on his target list? Just remember, there's someone who can identify the ones who killed Cedric Diggory. Are you willing to be responsible for further deaths because you disregarded the evidence you have? The previous government is already partly at fault for the deaths of 3 families. If you don't force the current one to act, can you be sure that it won't be responsible for even more dead because of inaction in the end? I, for my part, don't want to know. And so I plead with the minister, with the government and everyone else who is willing to listen to give Lord Potter the right to speak up about Cedric Diggory's death. It's a simple case of viewing evidence, and yet maybe it's the only hope for potential future victims. If the minister refuses, I will hold him responsible for every future dead who's killed by the murderer who killed Cedric Diggory thanks to the minister's inaction. So I plead with the ministry, give Lord Potter the right to finally speak up. And maybe, if we're lucky, no other family will have to lose a child because the murderer's caught before he or they can do more harm than they already have. Oliver Twist. Harry put down the newspaper he had been reading. He was quite happy with the prearranged article he had sent Zeno. Harry had known, thanks to Amelia Bones and Augusta Longbottom, that Sirius's case would be viewed by the Wizengamot soon. So Harry had pre-written the article since Amelia had told Augusta that there was no way that Sirius wouldn't get free. Harry was quite proud of the article. It fit wonderfully into his plans. Now he had just to put something else in motion. And if he had to risk being tattled on for that one again, well, so be it. His gaze wandered to his best female friend. Hermione was working on her homework. She was scribbling frantically, and Harry looked at her sheet of parchment with interest. He read her work thoroughly, just to read it again afterwards. After he had read it the 3rd time, he finally decided to speak up. After all, what better time than now? Hermione? What do you want, Harry? Hermione asked, a little bit peeved that Harry would bother her while she was doing her homework. What are you writing there? Harry asked, still looking at her paper. My homework for ancient runes, Harry, she answered crisply. Harry still did not stop looking. His eyes were traveling through her lines as if he was reading them. I don't understand it, Harry said, making sure to sound troubled. Are you sure you are doing it right? It's ancient runes, Harry, Hermione said coolly. Of course you don't understand it. I am writing runes. Yeah, wrongly, Harry answered shortly, still letting his eyes wander. Your sentence does not make any sense. How would you know that? Look at it, the boy answered. Whatever you want to say, you don't say it at all. Your whole text is full of grammar errors. As if you would know, Hermione snorted. Ron instead laughed. Don't annoy her too much, Harry, he howled, laughing. She might stop helping us in our classes. I don't need help in my classes, Ron, Harry answered, shrugging, and she has written a lot of rubbish. Harry, Hermione stared at him angrily. No, look, Hermione, Harry retorted. And those druids the runes used are permanently differ from our use today. What the hell are you trying to say with this sentence? Hermione blinked. Of course she had heard Bredjoneg before. Her teacher had spoken it when she read out the runes. But Harry's accent was different. When Professor Babbling was reading the runes, her wording was halting and she had to think about every word she was pronouncing carefully. Sometimes Professor Babbling even gave them 2 or 3 possible pronunciations, simply because they had no way knowing how the druids had really pronounced their words. Harry instead had been reading her sentence as if it was plain English. Not hoard, not searching for words, just reading. Harry, what? She stopped, unsure what she really wanted to say. What? Harry asked, as if nothing special had happened. Still not convinced? This question finally let Hermione find her voice again. You have been reading runes, Harry? She cried, still unable to comprehend what just happened. Yes, Harry said slowly, now looking at her as if she was a wild tiger ready to strike. No one is reading runes like that anymore, Hermione tried to tell him. You shouldn't be able. Professor Babbling is one of the best at ancient runes, and she still has to think about every word she is reading. How can you read it as if it was plain English? Harry blinked at that and stared at her text again, then at her and finally again at her text. Then he shrugged. That doesn't matter, Hermione, Harry answered, shaking his head. Your use of runes is way more important. How do you want to use them in magic when you are writing like that? It took a moment to understand his question, and then Hermione looked at him with complete confusion in her eyes. Harry, you can't use runes for magic, she said. They are useful to understand old texts, but they aren't used for any kind of magic. When she finished her sentence, Harry sighed. Why, by wind and fire, do you think that runes can't be used in magic? He said, shaking his head again. Hermione opened her mouth to reply. She wasn't even sure what she wanted to say herself, just to be stopped by Harry, who continued as if nothing happened. Well, let's fix your text, and maybe later I will show you, he finally said, adjusting her text so that he could read it better. This sentence I read before, what do you want to say? He asked. Hermione stared at him, still astonished by his words, but she answered anyway. I wanted to write, and thus, the runes the Druids used are absolutely different than the ones we use today, she answered. So you mixed up Ehelvis and Ehelvis again, Harry said. Huh? Ehelwas, he pointed at the rune in her text. This has to be Ehelwas. When you're writing the wrong rune here, the meaning changes and the thus you want to write will change in those which you definitely don't want to write here. Huh? Hermione looked down on her text, utterly flabbergasted. That can't be right, Harry, she finally said. I am sure this word is pronounced like written with it was. It is, Harry answered, shrugging. It's still written with was, though. It's just one of the exceptions. Exceptions? What exceptions? Hermione asked, now staring at Harry as if he was crazy. There are no exceptions. Does your class have something like a dictionary? Harry asked, sighing. Of course, Hermione answered, peeved. Then look it up. She stared at him for another 3 minutes, and then she took out her runes book and looked up the word, and there it stood in cold print, written with the Equas. How? I told you it was written with Equas, Harry just said, shrugging. That's because it was once pronounced with it, so, let's change your sentence. Right. And thus the runes the Druids used are absolutely different than the ones we use today. Hermione blinked again when he dictated her the sentence. Finally, she grabbed her quill again to write down what Harry had been dictating her. Stop, Harry said when she wrote the first rune. Really, Hermione? You can't write runes like that. You will ruin your spellwork. Hermione stared confused at her text, while Ron now looked absolutely flabbergasted from one of his friends to the other. What am I doing wrong now, Harry? Hermione finally asked. Your runes are sluggish, Harry answered, shaking his head. You have to write them neat to use them for spell work. I am writing neat, Hermione said coolly. No. You cannot change their outlining, Harry answered, persistent. They all have to fit in a square. What are you talking about, Harry? The boy sighed and claimed the quill in Hermione's hand with his left, and then he wrote down the sentence beneath her own writing. Hermione stared at the sentence. She had to give it to Harry. When she compared her writing and hers was definitely sloppy and childlike. With Harry, every letter he used seemed to use the same space the others did. There was no difference, even if the letter itself consisted just of a few strokes. Wow, that's really neat, Harry, Hermione said, still looking at the written sentence. Harry just shrugged. It's the way it has to be when you want to use them for magic, he answered. You should learn to write them properly like that. Hermione still stared at the parchment in front of her. I doubt I will be able to write like that, Harry, she finally said. Then use something to help you, like the Muggle math notebooks or something like that. Harry, even if I don't write as neat as you do, I don't have to. You just use runes for old texts. They have no other use, and so I don't have to. Harry sighed at that and took out his wand. Before Hermione could even finish her sentence, he drew a few runes in the air with it. The runes flashed, and suddenly the noise of the common room vanished. It was as if they suddenly were alone in the full room. Neat, Ron said. What spell did you use, Harry? No spell, Ron, Harry answered, stowing away his wand. Runes. Hermione gawked at him. Her gaze flew through the common room and the missing noise and returned to the wizard who did this. How? She asked. I told you, you can use runes for magic, Harry answered, shrugging. It's a simple ward, something old family houses have. There is no equivalent in normal spellwork. But, Hermione stuttered. But why didn't Professor Babblings tell us? Because using runes like that can be deadly if you do it wrong, Harry answered, suddenly serious. Spells you can easily reverse. Runes you can't. You have to disable their hold on you or you will never be able to escape them. If you write them sloppy or wrongly, you will suffer for it. Die for it if your spell work was a more complex one. Stop! What about the runes you used here? Ron asked suddenly fearfully. You know how to reverse them, do you? I don't want to be deaf forever. You're not deaf, Harry answered, rolling his eyes. I just silenced this area. When you walk 2 feet this way, he pointed to the crowed area of the room. You will be able to hear all of them again. The runes are not keeping you here, so the worst that could happen would be having a prank plotting area in the middle of the common room. Nothing grave. And don't worry, I know how to unspell the area again. I also did nothing wrong because I can write runes and I know my grammar, so no danger here. Neat, was Ron's reply, while he stood up and walked 2 feet to his right until he left the silenced area and returned. Absolutely neat. Can you teach me, Harry? I don't think I can, Harry answered. You need a lot of knowledge beforehand to even try to cast anything simple. You do not learn it overnight. Well, you seem to have just done that, Hermione said, looking at him strangely. When exactly did you learn this? Harry grinned and shrugged. A long time ago, he answered. A really long time ago. For a moment, Hermione hesitated, and Harry could again see the suspicion in her eyes. He returned her gaze evenly, his eyes promising her that if she even dared to go to Dumbledore with this, it would be the last time ever that she would be able to call herself friend. Hermione's eyes widened. Then she snorted. Very funny, Harry, she said, choosing to ignore the unexplainably of Harry's talent. And now tell me who taught you this stuff to prank me. At that Harry sighed. No one, he answered seriously. I did not learn anything to prank you. I am in fact not pranking you at all. I thought you might want to have help. Hermione stared at him with unbelieving eyes. Look, if you don't trust me, why don't you let me help you and afterwards go to someone else so that he or she can look it over? Harry suggested. I am sure you know some older Gryffindors or even Ravenclaws that have taken ancient runes as well. They can tell you if my suggestions really sound totally wrong, or go directly to the professor if you don't trust their judgment. I don't mind this time around. For a moment it looked as if Hermione did not want to do something like that, but then she nodded. Okay, help me, but if it's wrong then do never bother me again. Deal? Deal? Harry answered, shrugging. He did not need to help her at all, but it was the perfect opportunity to set up his stage, and he also had decided to try to kit the friendship with her a little bit. He knew that he did not involve her or Ron like the younger Harry had used to, so he had searched for a way to still be friends with them, even if they weren't his closest friends anymore. Now he had just to wait until Hermione would show it to someone else, and Harry was pretty sure that she would go to the Professor of Ancient Runes with it, and not to some other student. Of course, she might even go to Dumbledore, but Harry was sure that she wouldn't risk it for now. She was still collecting evidence about his changes, and maybe, just maybe, she would be able to accept that he was different without going to Dumbledore first. If she couldn't, Harry wasn't sure if her friendship was still worth it to hold on. He couldn't live with friends who spied on him for one of his enemies after all. A day later, Professor Bathsheba-Babbling had an interesting visitor after lunch. Miss Granger, she greeted the young girl when said girl entered her office. How may I help you? Well, the girl hesitated. Don't worry, just tell me, Bathsheba said, and finally the girl stepped forward and showed her an essay. Could you look through it and tell me if the grammar is right, Professor? The girl asked, and Bathsheba raised one of her eyebrows. You know I cannot. No, it's just that you know most when it comes to ancient runes, and while I was writing the essay for this class, someone saw it and corrected my grammar, but I don't know if I can trust his advice, because I thought he knows nothing about ancient runes. Bathsheba frowned when she heard the girl's explanation, but still took the essay. The first thing she noted was that the style of the essay was completely different. While Hermione Granger did know her runes, she still wrote in a style a young child would use. The grammar in this essay was more complex and more correct than anything Bathsheba had ever seen produced by a student. "Do you have something that is written by this mystical person?" Bathsheba finally asked the girl. Hermione Granger turned to her school bag and started to look through it. Finally, she handed Bathsheba another parchment, this time written by someone completely different. Bathsheba could see the difference without even trying to. While Hermione Granger did write neat, the person who had written the sentences on the other parchment did write even neater. Hermione Granger's letters looked like something produced by a child when you compared them both. "He told me that I write like a baby," Hermione Granger declared in that moment. "He also told me that I would be unable to ever use those runes in magic when I don't learn to write neat." Bathsheba blinked and looked at the girl in front of her. "I would like to meet this mysterious person," she said finally. So the grammar is correct?" the girl asked, hesitating. Bathsheba snorted. "More than correct. I would say absolutely perfect. Not even a master can write like that. That's the style used in books that are centuries old. I never thought a student would ever be good enough to even come near something like that. Normally it takes decades to write neat and grammatically good enough to write like your friend. When he's really as good as it looks like, I really need to speak with him. Someone with so much talent should pursue ancient runes." Hermione Granger stared at her. "He is really that good?" she asked, astonished. Bathsheba nodded. "He could be a rune master in no time," she answered. "Whoever your friend is, I cannot believe he did not elect the subject in third year." The girl in front of her blinked. "How do you know?" "I am sure I would have found him long ago if he had taken my class," Bathsheba answered. "Would you be so kind and tell him to come to me?" I will," the girl stuttered. Then she hesitated before she added, "Thank you for checking my essay," and with that the girl left. Bathsheba's gaze followed her, while she tried to figure out who in this whole school knew so much in runes that it equaled her own knowledge, or even surpassed it. Bathsheba got her answer just a few hours later. She was sitting in her office trying to translate a text she had found in the library some weeks ago. The text was old and written in runes and Brezhnev. It was about transfigurations, and Bathsheba was sure that it had information in it that Minerva McGonagall would steal for. The only problem Bathsheba had was that the text was too complex for her to understand it fully. She had translated the most of it, but there were a lot of text passages she simply wasn't sure about. She sighed and put down the book again to close her eyes. She wasn't sure if she would ever be able to translate the text fully. In that moment, the door to her office opened. Bathsheba looked up just to see Harry Potter coming in and closing the door softly behind him. A warm red glow indicated a ward of some kind that fell into place when he closed the door. "What?" she started, but was interrupted by the boy himself. "You wanted to see me, Professor," he said neutrally.
I did?"
she said, a little bit stumped. "You asked Hermione Granger to send for me a few hours ago," the boy answered softly. It took a moment to catch up for Bathsheba. "So you are this mysterious person who has a better grasp for ancient runes than any other student I ever saw." The boy shrugged and stepped forward to her desk. Bathsheba smiled at him when she saw his interest in the book before her on the desk. "I tried to translate it for your head of house," she told him. The boy said nothing, but he turned the book in front of her to look at it. Bathsheba saw his eyes travel through the lines faster than her own could. "Permanent transfiguration, a complicated subject you are translating there, Professor," the boy said. "You can tell?" Bathsheba asked, surprised. The boy in front of her snorted. "I am able to read, Professor," he answered. "But that's a really complicated text in runes," Bathsheba said, surprised. The boy just shrugged and turned her translation to also look through it. "You have made some mistakes in there," the boy said. Bathsheba looked at him startled and turned the text so that she could read them. "I do not think so." "Oh, but you have," the boy said. "Let me explain." The next half an hour Bathsheba learned more about ancient runes than she had ever before. The things the boy mentioned were startling, but at the same time fitting. Suddenly the text she had been trying to comprehend for the last 3 weeks made absolute sense to her. While the boy spoke, she took hastily written notes, promising herself that she would write them better later. The boy frowned when he saw her writing down her runes. "You are also not writing neat," the boy said. Bathsheba blinked at him in surprise and looked down on her notes. "I just need to know what you said later," she told him. "There is no need to write neat." The boy frowned again, clearly not agreeing in opinion, but he said nothing and just continued. Finally he stopped. "You should try to translate the book with this information. I think that might be enough to understand everything," he declared. Bathsheba looked down on her notes and back up to him. "How do you know all that?" she asked. "There is no one that knows. Family magic," the boy answered. "I am not allowed to tell you." Family magic. Bathsheba was sure that the family magics the boy was talking about weren't the runes itself, but the comprehending he had for them. She had heard a lot about family magic before. Her family, the babbling family, and all the other traditional families had a kind of family magic. Normally it was a special ability that the family members were born with. She had heard about a lot of abilities that counted to family magics. Because of that, she knew of the fire ability that once traveled through the line of Pendragon. Or that's what the legends and myths of the Pendragon line talked about. She knew that the Potter family had the ability to guide energy. Still, there were abilities not every family displayed. Some abilities were kept hidden. Maybe like the ability that enabled the young Potter in front of her to understand the runes and the language they were written in so easily. And it was this thought that led her to another idea. "So you have the ability to understand texts like that easily?" she asked the boy. Harry Potter nodded. "Have you ever tried it with another language than Brishoneg, or with different runes?" This time the boy shrugged. "Why should I?" he asked innocently. "Well, I have an old, worn black leather book with faded green writing on it," the she answered. "I do not understand it, and I have not found a way to translate it until now." "And you wish for me to take a look at it?" the boy concluded. Bathsheba stared at Harry Potter, and there she had heard some of the other teachers complain that he did not pick up on things fast enough. Instead of answering, she stood up and opened one of her cupboards. There the book she had lent from the library was stored in. Bathsheba had wanted to try to translate it, but she had to stop at the first page. The writing of the book was extremely neat, but the language used was no language known by her. She guessed it was an old dialect that had been forgotten long ago. To her dismay, she had not found a starting point to understand it until now. "I fear you also might not be able," Bathsheba. It started but stopped when Harry Potter took the book from her hands and started to leaf through it. He finally opened the book fully on one page, his finger traveling through the lines. Bathsheba held her breath. It would not be so easy, would it? Are you able to understand?" Bathsheba asked the boy. Harry Potter looked up, and in her eyes, "I think I am," he answered, "but I must look at it more closely to be sure. Would you mind if I take it and try to translate it?" Bathsheba stared at the boy in front of her. Several questions were filling her mind. How was he able to read what even she was unable to? How could he understand runes without learning them before? She knew he had been raised by his Muggle aunt, so there was no way he had learned to read runes at home. So how? Was it really just the family magic? But before she could even utter one sentence, the boy's eyes pierced into her own. Something shifted in her mind, and she started to forget what was so special about the book in the young boy's hands before her. "May I take it?" he asked her, and she found herself nodding the positive. "Thank you." And with that the boy left the room, leaving behind Bathsheba, who was still unable to comprehend what exactly had happened. After all, the book the boy had taken was nothing special at all, so why bothering to ask her for it? It had been old, worn and strained, and some pages had gone missing. She had found it today between her other books, and had thought to throw it away. And she would have put it in the waste bin if he wouldn't have taken it before, so why had he even bothered to ask for it? Bathsheba would never know that her memory had been shifted that day, so that the book was nothing special anymore in her mind at all. That night, Harry and Regulus met in the Chamber of Secrets. All right, I've got the book, Harry said. I'll soon be able to work around the current wards to add my own ward for the Horcrux detection to them. So you didn't find its whereabouts in the castle when you did the ritual? Rejek asked, concerned. Harry shook his head. Tommy interfered, he said, and Regulus blinked confused. Tommy. Tom Riddle, also known as the Dark Lord, Harry answered. I don't think that he actually ever grew up enough to be a Tom, so I usually call him Tommy in my head. Rage raised an eyebrow at that. You're awfully interested in talking today, he remarked, and Harry shrugged. I'm dying. I have the right to have some fun before I kick the bucket, he answered, and immediately there was concern in Reg's eyes to see. What do you mean, you are dying? He asked, his face rapidly losing color. Harry just smiled at him. There's always a price to pay, Harry said. The ritual on Halloween basically went wrong. The consequences to something like that are always death or losing one's mind. Since I'm actually quite dependent on my mind, I'm quite happy that I got the first consequences to deal with. And you choose to tell me that I'll lose you quite soon just like that, without further warning in a single sentence? Reg exclaimed in disbelief. Harry just rolled his eyes. You and I know that you're just here with me because I'm about to kill off Tom. If I wouldn't, you wouldn't be there. You basically raised me from the moment you pulled me out of that lake. You are the one who's responsible that I'm a halfway decent human being now. Do you truly believe that I wouldn't care about you if you weren't about to kill the Dark Lord? Harry thought about that for a moment, then he shrugged. No, he said, but it doesn't matter either way. You're dying and I still have some time until it's truly something to be concerned about. I guess my death is at least half a year away, so may we return to more pressing matters now. Reg opened his mouth at that, but then just closed it. All right, he gave in. What do you think is more important than you dying? I had a stint into Tommy's mind while I scared away the Dementors that he wanted to recruit, Harry answered. I might not have found the location of the Hogwarts Horcrux, but I have a good guess about another one now. And how did that happen? Reg wanted to know, and Harry grinned. Seems that even as a half-insane ghost-like being, I'm still capable of doing something usable, he said, smirking. When I used the rune connection I built between him and me to pull me to him, I got a short glance, not only in his emotions and current plans, but into his past as well. Truly, if I had known how usable that damn rune connection could be, I would have done a more thorough one than I did back then. If you could do it, why didn't you? Reg asked, surprised, and Harry grimaced. Because truthfully, I'm quite happy that I can stay out of his mind for the most parts. I needed the connection to him to ensure that I have some warning before he acts and to manipulate him to some kind, but the connection can go both ways, and I definitely don't want to find a Dark Lord in my mind. My knowledge of the dark arts would make him to a nearly unstoppable opponent if he ever had access to it. I wouldn't risk it. Better so, Reg said, gulping. My thoughts exactly, Harry said gravely. Still, doesn't change my wish that it would be different. Sometimes. Now back to the knowledge I gained thanks to my involuntary visit at the Azkaban raid. So, what did you find out? Reg asked, sighing. I need some information about Tom Riddle's family, his wizarding family, the Gaunts, Harry answered. If I understood it right, then he has hidden one of his Horcruxes at the old home of the Gaunt family. So you want me to collect that information? Reg asked with a raised eyebrow. Well, I can't leave here, Harry said, shrugging. And I'm dead, Reg commented. Harry grinned at that. Even more the reason for you to do it, he said. There's no way that anybody will recognize you when you break into the ministry, and I thought that Augusta Longbottom was helping you now, Reg said, sneering. She's part of the Wizengamot. Can't you send her? Well, I originally planned to send her to retrieve the information, but you seemed quite eager to do it yourself, he answered, grinning. I wouldn't dare to object if you wished to do something more than to be my messenger to Augusta. Reg snorted at that. So you send a dead man as a messenger? Harry shrugged at that. Dobby and Winky can't do it. I need someone who can do some research in the Muggle world, if we have to. Augusta knows nothing about the Muggle world, and Dobby and Winky can't enter it without being obvious. I can't go since I'm a student here, So you're the only one left. Great, Regulus exclaimed. Just great. I've been dead for over 15 years. I am happy to be dead. And now you send me to one of the members of the Wizengamot to work with. What about me being a happy dead? I don't want to live again. Harry just rolled his eyes. Don't complain, Reg. You knew for at least 6 years that you would return to the living again sometime in the future. Your brother's free now, meaning that he might need someone to have his back when he takes on his true place as Lord Black. You're the only one who can support him, so it would be good for you to return slowly to the living now. My brother hasn't even shown any interest in his lordship until now, Reg said. Harry just shrugged but said nothing, so Reg continued agitated. You and I know that he despises his family. He wouldn't even think about taking on the lordship of House Black now that he's free. He wouldn't, Harry answered, nodding, and that's the reason why you have to meet Augusta and work with her. You have to build at least a working relationship, at best an alliance with her. Sirius won't be able to get out of his duties when Augusta presses for him to acknowledge the alliance. Not even Sirius is idiotic enough to refuse to acknowledge Augusta if she tells him that your families are allies. But Sirius is already free. I can't build any alliances with Augusta now that Black has a lord again. But that's it, Harry said, grinning. Black doesn't have a lord yet. Like you said, Sirius refuses to be lord. As long as he refuses, his heir has still the right to build alliances. And since I'm now allied with Augusta, she won't take long to express an interest of alliance with you, especially if I am the one to send you to her in the first place. It's only logical, after all, to be allied with the allies of your allies. For a moment Reg remained silent. Then he sighed. And you decided to wait to do that until now. Why? Because I still needed a reason to start an alliance, and that reason was just provided by Tom a few days ago. Harry grinned at that. The Horcruxes search outside of Hogwarts, Regulus said, surprise in his voice. The Horcruxes search outside of Hogwarts, Harry repeated, content, and Regulus closed his eyes and groaned. Moody sat down silently. All around him the rest of the Order of the Phoenix was talking among themselves while they waited for their leader to arrive. The only one who wasn't even interested in conversation was Alistair Moody. He was thinking. In his mind the words of Harry Potter, no, Harry James Potter, repeated all over again. Albus Dumbledore could have stopped Grindelwald before the man even would have truly started, by simply opening his mouth. Albus Dumbledore could have stopped Voldemort before he even turned dark if he just had decided to act instead of watching. But those weren't the worst parts. He calls you his right-hand man, one of his closest friends, Harry James had said. And yet you were locked into your own trunk without him even noticing the difference for a whole year. When Moody had been freed, he had originally never blamed Albus Dumbledore. Now, instead, this sureness had ceased to exist. Albus had known him for over 60 years. They had worked together, traveled together, and yet Albus had noticed nothing strange over the last year. Or he noticed it and decided to use it to his benefits, never even thinking about your predicament. A voice that sounded suspiciously like Harry James's whispered in his head. He's manipulative, you know that. You've adored that in the past. Do you truly think that he wouldn't have used the opportunity if it had presented itself to him? Moody figured that the most horrible part of those thoughts wasn't that Albus was a manipulative bastard. Moody had suspected that for years. No, the most horrible part was that Moody finally knew that Albus Dumbledore would do everything to reach his ultimate goal, and if it meant to damn a 15-year-old boy and his right-hand man, so be it. Moody wasn't sure if he could accept that. In that moment Albus entered and Moody forced his thoughts to return to the present. It was time to talk about guard duties and possible plans of the Dark Lord. I wonder why we have never included Harry James Potter into these meetings, Moody mused. They are about him after all. Shouldn't he at least know about the danger he's in and what we do to stop it from reaching him? But maybe those thoughts were just fueled by the desperate need for another Slytherin. Snape definitely didn't count in Moody's eyes. In this ocean of Gryffindors, the Order consisted of Tom Riddle, by the wizarding world mostly known as Lord Voldemort, was currently in a bad mood. The reason was his new ally Anastasius Sanguini, head of Crew R as Coven of the Vampires. So, That's what you're doing all day long? Sitting around and waiting for nothing? The vampire said with interest in his voice before looking around the ballroom they were currently inhabiting. The room was empty except of them and two other Death Eaters. Even Lucius Malfoy, the head of the family whose manor they were currently using, had found a way to be anywhere but at the Dark Lord's side. Not that other Death Eaters could fault him for that. Their lord had been in a full mood since the raid on Azkaban and the refusal of the Dementors to join their alliance. Since then, Tom Riddle had used his days to search ancient tomes for the odd occurrence he had witnessed in Azkaban. He had long since rebutted that the appearance had anything to do with his nemesis Potter. After all, every Death Eater with a child at Hogwarts could affirm that the boy was firstly still at Hogwarts and secondly very much alive, and had since then tried to find out what had scared away one of his best possible allies in this coming war. Until now, he hadn't found an answer to that at all. Isn't it a bit dreary to sit here all day watching an empty room? The vampire asked in that moment. His voice ripped Tom Riddle out of his musing, and the Dark Lord looked up irritated. The vampire's face wasn't even an inch away from his own face. Studying him closely, Voldemort snarled, whipped out his wand and aimed it at his opponent. Crucio. The spell flew through the room, hitting one of his two Death Eaters instead of the vampire he had been aiming at. The vampire himself had sidestepped the curse without even breaking a sweat. Now, he was watching the Death Eater who had been hit writhing on the floor in agony. Then he turned back to look at the Dark Lord. Don't you think that it's a bit counterproductive to torture your allies without a reason? It might make it a little bit harder to gather new ones if your treatment of your current ones comes out into the open, the vampire commented, his eyes still glued in fascination on the twitching form of the Death Eater. The other Death Eater looked at the one on the floor and then fled the room. Voldemort instead roared with agitations after listening to the vampire's comment. No need to go berserk on me, the vampire said, turning his eyes back towards the Dark Lord. I was just saying. Voldemort took aim at the vampire again. Crucio. This time, he hit the candelabra. The vampire's gaze followed the spell and both Dark Lord and vampire watched the candelabra first swinging dangerously before crashing to the floor. I'm also not too sure if your allies take it too kindly if you are that careless with their property, Anastasius commented dryly. The Dark Lord turned his furious red eyes towards the loud-mouthed vampire. His wand again took aim. The vampire watched it warily. You sure you want to do another spell? He asked. What if you bring down the manor around us this time around? You don't seem too good at aiming after all. The furious roar this time around could be heard all over the manor and its grounds. Lucius Malfoy shivered in his study. Since that damn vampire had joined their ranks, the Dark Lord had been even more often in a dark mood. Sometimes Lucius dearly regretted the day Anastasius Sanguini had joined the Death Eaters. Sometimes Lucius regretted that he himself had joined, and sometimes he regretted dearly that he had offered his home to house the Dark Lord. In this moment, another crash could be heard from the hall. I told you, your aim is off, the vampire could be heard. Or did you actually want to hit your Death Eater so that he crashes into the antique crockery? I doubt that neither your host nor your target will be happy with the outcome you had here. Yes, there were definitely days that made Lucius regret every decision he had ever made concerning the Dark Lord, and today was one of these days. Luckily it's one of the last ones, Lucius thought. He didn't want to replace his whole manor, and if Anastasius Sanguini wouldn't stop to irk the Dark Lord soon, it was more than likely that that was the final outcome for whoever would be unfortunate to house those two in the future. Harry was walking down to dinner when he saw the fifth-year Slytherins coming from the dungeons. Perfect, he said to himself, before wandering over to them to intercept before they reached the Great Hall. He had not been planning the whole thing until now, but he guessed that he could get started on it today without any problems. And if Hermione complained, well, it had been her who had asked him to do it in the first place. She couldn't fault him for actually taking his new task seriously, could she? Harry guessed she couldn't, so he was safe. With that thought he pulled out his wand and wrote some runes into the air. A second later they flashed golden and vanished. That took Harry as his cue to approach the fifth-year Slytherins. I know this is not the usual way for Gryffindors to act, Harry started, looking at the Slytherins in front of him. But I also know that you are also suffering under the teaching methods of the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. So I will ask you anyway. Ask us what? Malfoy asked. It was clear that the blonde heir was still the spokesman of the fifth-year Slytherins, like he had been since first year. I'm here to ask you to join the Defense Association me and my friends are forming. It could be beneficial for you as well, considering that you Lycas have to pass OWLs at the end of the year, Harry answered. Malfoy sneered at that. And why would we need to join your Defense Association? He asked, unimpressed. Because, if you like it or not, you will have trouble passing your defense MODL if you don't get some training in actually casting the spells you should be learning this year. The Defense Association could help you with that, if you join. And why should we even think about joining something a Gryffindor has initiated? Another Slytherin, Theodore Nott asked with a raised eyebrow. Harry just shrugged. Because I offered and you are Slytherins, meaning you take an advantage if you get it, he answered. I'm currently the best in defense of Year 5. It would be totally un-Slytherin to not even think about my offer. At that, Theodore Nott and some others snorted. You truly think that you can keep it from Umbridge? Blaise Zabini asked. You truly think that it will stay a secret if you ask people in the corridors of Hogwarts willy-nilly? Why not? Harry answered, grinning. It's not as if I haven't been able to keep things from the teachers before while still talking out here in the open. Theodore Nott just shook his head at that. Recklessness, he said, and others nodded at that. That was the moment. Malfoy decided to re-enter the conversation. And how will you stop us from talking about your plans to Umbridge? Now that we know of them, he said. Harry just smiled. I don't need to stop you, he answered. You were already stopped before I even talked to you. Malfoy snorted. Sure thing, Potter, he said, disbelieving. So you don't believe me, Harry said. Then he shrugged. Well, we'll see who's right in the end. Just think about my offer, will you? And with that he turned away from them with the intention to enter the Great Hall. It was Malfoy's voice that stopped him in his tracks. Whatever you try to do, Potter, it will not succeed. Just leave it be. When you don't, you might regret it, he hissed. Harry just raised an eyebrow at the boy in front of him. Regret what? He asked, and turned back towards the Slytherins. Regret your try to turn us against the Dark Lord, Malfoy answered. And don't you dare to tell me that that wasn't your intention from the start. Harry just shrugged. Not truly, he said, and Malfoy snorted. So Harry raised an eyebrow and looked at the boy in front of him. Don't tell me that you truly want to follow the Dark Lord, he asked incredulously. Of course, Malfoy hissed. Why shouldn't we? The other Slytherins meanwhile looked at each other with hesitation in their eyes. Harry acted as if he hadn't seen it and focused on Malfoy instead. It seemed like it was time for a little teaching. Then you want to be a bigoted idiot who is licking the boots of a half-blood? He asked the boy in front of him. And I thought you were a Slytherin. I am a Slytherin, Malfoy hissed, and Harry saw the other Slytherins from higher years beside him, turning to them. They clearly had started to listen. Harry smirked inwardly. Perfect. You are? He asked, seemingly astonished. And I thought a true Slytherin is clever, cunning, and ambitious. What is ambitious about being a bootlicker? What is clever about following a mere mudblood blindly in your demise? What is cunning about letting you be branded like a cow or a slave? No, you don't sound like a Slytherin to me, you sound like a coward. As an answer, Malfoy hurled a borderline dark spell at him. Harry just smirked and reached with his bare hand for the magic. The spell changed its direction and started to dance together with Harry's fingers. Then Harry took the light into his hand and it vanished without a trace. The Slytherins around him stared at him. A Slytherin knows to use every situation for his advantage. He knows when to show his strength and when to hide it. Harry said softly, he would never start a fight against someone he does know nothing about. And with that, Harry rose his other hand. Golden runes glowed on the floor, and in the next second, Malfoy was imprisoned in a golden cage, out of light. The Malfoy heir stared at him, the fear clearly visible in his eyes. Harry just looked at him for a moment, then he banished the light cage and left the boy unharmed. "What?" Malfoy asked, clearly baffled about Harry's actions. "A Slytherin knows when it's time to humiliate his opponent and when it's time to leave it be," Harry said. "You are clearly a strong wizard, Draco Malfoy. As a Slytherin, I know that having you on my side would be more advantageous than having you as an opponent. Think about it. I even might teach you some tricks like those I showed you today." And with that, Harry turned and left the Slytherins stand where they were. Malfoy stared after him. "You are no Slytherin," he finally cried just before Harry could vanish around a corner. Harry stopped and turned. Then he smirked. "But I am," he answered, smiling widely. "I would have been sorted into Slytherin if I hadn't begged the Sorting Hat not to." "But why?" another Slytherin asked with huge eyes. Harry smirked. "Because no one would ever suspect to find a snake in a lion's fur," and with that he vanished around the corner. Only time would tell if his little stunt had changed his standing in the eyes of Slytherin. Harry was quite sure that it had. The Slytherins would come to his defense association. If it was for his words or the display of his power, Harry would see the most important thing was their involvement, and that was something that he had ensured today. Cornelius Fudge took a deep breath, then he opened the meeting of the Wizengamot. He had asked for the meeting just a few days ago, and unlike normally, he had insisted on the Wizarding Wireless to join them. "Today, I'm here to speak to you about a grievous matter," he said. "Unfortunately, I've become aware of an approaching threat to our ways of life. A threat which will destroy everything we love if we don't stop it now when it's still easily stoppable." He could see that he now had the attention of every member of the Wizengamot as well as the attention of the reporter of the Wizarding Wireless. Fudge was quite sure that he had the attention of the rest of the wizarding world as well. "I am talking about a liar and a disturbance for our peaceful ways of life," he continued. "I'm talking about someone who's trying to bring the public to go against their government. If we don't do something soon, this man, this disturber of peace, will bring down our society with all the lies he's sprouting." This time he could see the concerned gazes that were exchanged between the witches and wizards of the Wizengamot. "I am talking about someone who is able to deceive the common man with sweet-sounding words and false promises. A man who doesn't mind to use even the most reputable business to reach his shady goals," he continued while basking in the attention. "I am talking about Oliver Twist,